Chapter 1393. Inside the hall, Luoho and the others had ugly expressions. Qi Yaoyao stood up and left without another word. In the starry sky, Yi Xian suddenly stopped with a woman standing in front of him. It was Qin Yaoyao. Qin Yaoyao looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "This isn't like you." Yi Xian said, "About the hall?" Qin Yaoyao nodded. Yi Xian smiled. "Miss Yaoyao, the Dao Tomb grounds have never trusted me. No matter how many top-grade ores I hand over, you still won't believe me, right?" Qin Yaoyao fell silent. Indeed. No matter how much Yi Xian handed over, the Dao Tomb grounds would think it wasn't enough. Qin Yaoyao looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "Then how many top-grade ores did you get?" Yi Xian looked at Qin Yaoyao. "Miss Yaoyao, are you asking me on behalf of the Dao Tomb grounds or yourself?" Qin Yaoyao blinked. "Is there a difference?" Yi Xian smiled. "There's a huge difference." How could Qin Yaoyao not understand Yi Xian's meaning? After a moment of silence, Qin Yaoyao said, "I won't ask any more." Yi Xian smiled. "Farewell." With that, he turned to leave. At this moment, Qin Yaoyao suddenly said, "Can I still kill you now?" Yi Xian stopped and looked at Qin Yaoyao. "I'm afraid not." He couldn't. Qin Yaoyao shook her head and smiled. She knew that Yi Xian must have had some fortuitous encounter in the dark world. Qi Yaoyao asked again, "Then can you kill me?" Yi Xian thought about it. "I can try." Qin Yaoyao looked at Yi Xian. "You're so confident?" Yi Xian smiled. "I'm not very confident." Qin Yaoyao's lips curled. "Want to exchange a few moves?" Yi Xian shook his head. "Miss Yaoyao, my enemy is Dao Ting, not you, and not the Dao Tomb. From the very beginning, I've never treated the Dao Tomb as an enemy. You should know this very well. However, the Dao Tomb doesn't think so. What do you think?" After a long period of silence, Qin Yaoyao asked, "Will we become enemies in the future?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "That will depend on what the Dao Tomb ground does." Qin Yaoyao looked at Yi Xian without saying anything. Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "Miss Yaoyao, have you ever thought of changing places?" Qin Yaoyao was taken aback for a moment before she smiled and said, "You want to rope me in?" Yi Xian nodded. "The fifth dimension is a good place. Are you interested in going there?" Qin Yaoyao smiled and said, "I'm very curious. What benefits are you going to use to win me over?" Yi Xian pondered for a moment before he asked, "What does Miss Yaoyao want?" Qin Yaoyao asked back, "What do you think I want?" Yi Xian looked at Qin Yaoyao and said, "You want to destroy the Dao Ting, the so-called Great Dao, because the Great Dao is unfair. But now, the Dao Tomb ground's goal is not Dao Ting. Miss Yaoyao, forgive me for being blunt, but even if the Dao Tomb ground destroys the Dao Ting, the world will still be unfair because the Dao Tomb ground will be the next Dao Ting. Miss Yaoyao, you should understand that the Dao Tomb ground is no longer fighting for their beliefs, but for themselves." Qin Yaoyao was silent. Yi Xian said again, "Miss Yaoyao, you should have investigated the fifth dimension. What do you think of it now?" Qin Yaoyao smiled and said, "Very good." Yi Xian looked at Qin Yaoyao and said, "I want to destroy the Dao Ting and rebuild the Great Dao of Order." Qin Yaoyao looked straight at Yi Xian and said, "Will you not become the next Dao Ting?" Yi Xian shook his head and said, "I won't." Qin Yaoyao smiled and said, "Why should I?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Miss Yaoyao, you understand." With that, he turned and left. Qin Yaoyao was silent. She naturally understood. Why did Yi Xian want to destroy the Dao Ting? Revenge. Revenge for Mu Ninian. What was Yi Xian's ultimate goal? To protect the fifth dimension. Yi Xian didn't care about the Dao scripture, power, or longevity. Or in other words, in his heart, the Dao scripture, power, longevity, and invincibility were not the most important. To him, friends, family, and the fifth dimension were more important. Yi Xian always knew what he wanted to do and what he wanted to fight for. But the Dao Tomb ground was no longer fighting for the beliefs of the past. What did the Tao breakers in the Tao tomb ground believe in? Fairness. Why did they resist the doubting? Because the great Tao was unfair. However, when they had great strength, would they fight for this so-called fairness for more people? No. Because there was no difference between them and the doubting itself. Everyone was fighting for themselves. This was why no one in the Tao tomb ground was able to forge a new path. In the past, the Tao Ting was about proving one's Tao, while the Tao tomb ground was about breaking one's Tao. But now, above breaking one's Tao was controlling one's Tao and achieving one's Tao. In other words, the Tao tomb ground and the Tao Ting path were the same. With this thought, Qian Yaoyao sighed and turned to leave. Doubting. In the main hall of the Divine Palace, Bai Dizzy and the others had ugly expressions on their faces. In the dark world, White Robe did not attack Yi Xian because he discovered that Yi Xian could ignore the turbid qi. Moreover, such a huge commotion in the dark world was definitely related to Yi Xian. What happened in the dark world? This was what they wanted to know the most. At this moment, Bai Dizzy said softly, "Things are getting worse for us." They really wanted to kill Yi Xian and used all their strength, but Yi Xian was still alive and well. Now, Yi Xian was growing every day, and they could only watch Yi Xian grow. It had to be said that this was a kind of torture for them. And now, even if they wanted to stop and make peace, it was impossible because Yi Xian would never stop and make peace. It could be said that between the doubting and Yi Xian, only one could survive. At this moment, Bai Dizzy suddenly said, "Wait." White Robe and the true martial divine lord looked at Bai Dizzy, and Bai Dizzy slowly closed his eyes. Wait for the Tao ancestor to come out of seclusion. Come out of seclusion. Now, only when the Tao ancestor came out could they change the situation of the doubting. In the fifth dimension. After Yi Xian returned to the fifth dimension, he immediately called Guan Yin. In the hall, Yi Xian said solemnly, "Only Shao Qi has reached Tao validation?" Guan Yin nodded. And Lanxiu, Arrow, and Agajio are on the verge of breaking through, but it's still not enough. There aren't enough Fortune Divine Crystals. Fortune Divine Crystals. Thinking of this, Guan Yin sighed softly. At this moment, she realized how important the Fortune Divine Crystals were. Not only were they useful to Tao validation experts, but they were also useful to self-release experts like her. This world was like this. Without money, no matter how much effort you put in, it was useless. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly took out a storage ring and handed it to Guan Yin. Guan Yin glanced at the storage ring, and the next moment, her expression changed drastically. There were 5 million Fortune Divine Crystals in the storage ring. Moreover, these Fortune Divine Crystals were several times purer than before. Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian and said with a trembling voice, "Where did you go to rob this time?" Yi Xian's face darkened. "What are you saying? What do you mean I went to rob again?" Guan Yin stared at Yi Xian. "Where did you get them?" Yi Xian said with a smile, "It's a long story, so I won't say much. You can distribute these Fortune Divine Crystals." Guan Yin glanced at Yi Xian and did not ask any more. She picked up the storage ring and left. In the hall, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Fortune Divine Crystals. He now had more than 38 million Fortune Divine Crystals. After giving 5 million to Guan Yin, he still had 33 million left. These Fortune Divine Crystals were enough to last the fifth dimension for 100 years. What he needed the most now was time. It could be said that it was not impossible for the fifth dimension to surpass the Tao Ting and the Tao Tomb. Inside the hall, Yi Xian took out the Tao scriptures. He now had 5 Tao scriptures. He already knew that there was one in the Tao Ting, one in the Tao Tomb, and one in the whirling world. What about the last one? Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Jiming, do you know the whereabouts of the last Tao scripture?" Yi Jiming said solemnly, "No." Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Tao scriptures. The spirit of the great Tao. This was what Sister Nian told him before she died. He must find the spirit of the great Tao. At this moment, Guan Yin suddenly ran into the hall. She looked at Yi Xian and said excitedly, "Good news." Yi Xian was stunned and asked, "Good news?" Guan Yin nodded and said excitedly, many spirits came." Spirits. Yi Xian and Guan Yin disappeared from the hall. Spirit Palace. On this day, countless spirits came to the Spirit Palace. These spirits were the spirits of heaven and earth that had been ordered by Xiao Linger to find spirits. Now, these spirits had returned. Not only did they return, but they also brought many spirits with them to the fifth dimension. Every spirit brought back a spirit, some even brought back a few. For a moment, the entire Spirit Palace became unusually lively. Yi Xian glanced at the entire Spirit Palace. There were more than 10,000 spirits. There were all kinds of spirits. And these spirits were surrounding Xiao Linger, and Xiao Linger was giving them divine crystals of fortune. At this moment, Xiao Linger suddenly looked up at Yi Xian. The next moment, she flew directly in front of Yi Xian, and all the spirits surrounded them. All the spirits were looking at Yi Xian and Xiao Linger. Xiao Linger grinned. "Brother, I want money." Yi Xian laughed. He took out a storage ring and handed it to Xiao Linger. Xiao Linger glanced at it, and the next moment, her eyes widened. "Wow," as she said that, she gave Yi Xian a big hug. There were 300,000 divine crystals of fortune in the storage ring. The reason why he did not give more was because he was afraid that this little girl would waste it. Xiao Linger began to give the spirits divine crystals of fortune. She was very generous because she had doubled the reward. Seeing that Xiao Linger had doubled the reward, the spirits were overjoyed. For a moment, the entire Spirit Palace was filled with chattering laughter. At this moment, Guan Yin's expression suddenly changed. She looked at Yi Xian. "She's gone." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Who?" Guan Yin said with a trembling voice, "Miss Nian Nian." Yi Xian directly disappeared. The next moment, he arrived in a starry sky, but that starry sky was empty. Mu Niannian's main body was gone. Yi Xian was stunned. P.S. Please. Chapter 1394. Gone. Yi Xian stood in the starry sky, looking as if he had lost his soul. At this time, Guan Yin appeared beside Yi Xian, her expression extremely ugly. Yi Xian asked, "What happened?" Guan Yin shook her head, "I don't know." At this time, an old man suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian and Guan Yin. The old man bowed to them, "Greetings, Alliance Leader Yi." "Miss Guan." Yi Xian looked at the old man, "What happened?" The old man shook his head, "I don't know either." Miss Nian's body was still there, but just now, her body disappeared. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Sister Nian's body was taken away. Who? Doubting? Thinking of this, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. At this time, Yi Jiming suddenly said, "It can't be Doubting." Yi Xian asked, "Why?" Yi Jiming said solemnly, "You need to calm down." Yi Xian fell silent, clenching his fists. Yi Jiming continued, "Doubting bringing Mu Niannian's body is meaningless. Are they going to use her body to threaten you? That's obviously impossible. Moreover, with your current strength, if someone stepped into the fifth dimension, you would definitely be able to detect it, right?" Yi Xian slowly clenched his right fist. Yi Jiming was right. With his current strength, if someone stepped into the fifth dimension, he would be able to detect it immediately. But just now, he did not sense any aura. Who was it? Yi Xian swept his gaze across the starry sky, his eyes as cold as ice. At this time, Source Spirit suddenly appeared. She looked at the empty starry sky in the distance, stunned, then looked at Yi Xian, "It's gone." Yi Xian nodded. Source Spirit asked, "Doubting?" Yi Xian shook his head, "Doesn't seem like it." Saying this, he slowly closed his eyes. Doubting? The Dao Tomb? But it didn't look like it. There was no reason for the Dao tomb. Although there was a reason for doubting, what was doubting doing with Sister Nian's body? Was he going to use it to threaten him? That was possible. With that thought in mind, Yi Xian opened his eyes, and in the next moment, he vanished on the spot. Guan Yin's expression changed when she saw this. She wanted to stop Yi Xian, but Yi Xian had disappeared without a trace. In the abyss of the heaven realm, in front of the main hall of the divine palace, a sword light suddenly appeared. Almost at the same time, a spear pierced through the air from within the palace. Boom! In the sky above the divine palace, a sword light exploded, and a man appeared above the divine palace. The person who had arrived was precisely Yi Xian. When Yi Xian appeared, Bai Dizzy, true martial god, and White Robe appeared as well. Bai Dizzy stared fixedly at Yi Xian. What are you trying to do? Yi Xian looked at Bai Dizzy. Did you do it? Bai Dizzy frowned slightly. What do you mean we did it? Yi Xian said fiercely, Sister Nian's body is no longer here. Did you doubting do it? Mu Nian's body. Bai Dizzy was stunned, and then he said, the fifth dimension Tendo's body is gone? Yi Xian stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Did you doubting? Bai Dizzy was about to speak when true martial god suddenly said, Yi Xian, I did not doubting do it. Yi Xian looked at true martial god, and true martial god said solemnly, doubting and you are mortal enemies, but not to this extent. Also, Mu Nian is the strongest. Although the omnipotent expert has already fallen, we still respect her very much. We would never do such a shameless thing. Yi Xian's expression became fiercer. If it wasn't you, who else could it be? True martial god looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, why do we want Mu Nian's body? Are we going to use it to threaten you? If so, we can use it to threaten you now. Also, doubting is not as despicable as you think. Even if we wanted to kill you, we would not use such despicable means. As he spoke, he glanced at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy immediately said angrily, why are you looking at me? I have never done such a thing, and I disdain to do it. True martial god nodded, very well. He, Jianghu, would never do something like stealing someone's corpse. In the distance, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Not doubting? Could it be the Dao tomb? At this moment, Qing Yaoyao suddenly appeared next to Yi Xian and looked at Yi Xian. It is not the Dao tomb, I am sure of this. Not the Dao tomb. Yi Xian was silent, his expression becoming more and more fierce. Who could it be? After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly turned and left. In the field, Qing Yaoyao frowned. Mu Nian's body was gone. Who would steal Mu Nian's body? Why would they steal it? Qing Yaoyao turned to look at Bai Dizzy and the others. It really wasn't you? True martial god said solemnly, Heavenly Monarch, doubting, am not that despicable. Besides, I, true martial, respect an expert like Mu Nian from the bottom of my heart. Why would I do such a despicable thing? Qing Yaoyao turned to look at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy was expressionless. What, am I that despicable? Qing Yaoyao said indifferently, true martial god is an expert and he has his pride, but you, Bai Dizzy, don't have that. What immoral things can't you do? Bai Dizzy said coldly, think whatever you want. Qi Yaoyao said nothing else and turned to leave. In the field, true martial god said solemnly, who would steal Mu Nian's body? Bai Dizzy said, doubting is the most suspicious, followed by the Dao tomb. True martial god looked at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy said, although she is dead, her body is also a five-dimensional tendo, and she is so strong. Her body must be useful. At this point, he said angrily, why are you looking at me like that? I said it. I didn't do it. At this time, White Robe suddenly said, if it wasn't us, and not the Dao tomb, then who could it be? The three fell into silence. After a long time, Bai Dizzy seemed to think of something and his pupils suddenly shrank. Could it be? White Robe and true martial god looked at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy's face was pale, and he was a little frightened. True martial frowned. Could it be what? Bai Dizzy said with a trembling voice, "It is possible. It is completely possible." At this point, he looked at True Marshal and White Robe. "Wait for my news." After saying this, he turned around and disappeared. True Marshal and White Robe were dumbfounded. Heavenly King Palace. At this time, Luo Ho and the others were there. They already knew that Mu Nyanyan's body in the five-dimensional universe had disappeared. Inside the palace, Luo Ho looked at Qian Yaoyao. "Do you think this was done by doubting?" Qian Yaoyao shook her head. "It doesn't seem like it. Like what True Marshal said, they are not that despicable. Especially True Marshal and White Robe, no matter what, they would not do anything to Mu Nyanyan's body. That kind of powerhouse is respected by everyone." Luo Ho nodded. Even he respected Mu Nyanyan from the bottom of his heart. Powerhouses still had their pride, especially people like True Marshal and White Robe. Therefore, he did not believe that White Robe and True Marshal had done anything to Mu Nyanyan's body. At this time, Bitter King suddenly said, "If it is not us, and not doubting, then who could it be? Or does this Yi Xian have other enemies?" In the palace, Qian Yaoyao was silent. No one spoke either. The palace sank into silence. After an unknown amount of time, Qian Yaoyao's pupils suddenly shrank. Could it be? In the palace, everyone looked at Qian Yaoyao. Qi Yaoyao did not speak. She stood up and left. After leaving the palace, she disappeared without a trace. No one knew where she went. In the palace, the three looked at each other. In the starry sky, Yi Xian just stood there, staring at the place where Mu Nyanyan's body had been. Disappeared without a trace. It was not the Dao tomb, nor was it Dao Ting. Then who could it be? Yi Xian's eyes were somewhat blank. Who took Sister Nian's body away? Yi Ling? She had the ability to take Sister Nian's body away without a trace, but she would not do so. Then who else could it be? Could it be that dark abyss? But that was not possible either. He could not think of anyone else. Just like that, Yi Xian stood in the starry sky for a whole day and a night. On this day, Yi Xian had unknowingly arrived in Shaman City. He just walked on the streets, looking as if he had lost his soul. Shaman City was bustling. There were stalls on both sides of the streets, and the sounds of people shouting could be heard. At that moment, an angry voice suddenly came from Yi Xian's right. "You thief, how dare you steal?" Yi Xian looked in the direction of the sound. Not far away, a fat man was whipping a beggar crazily with a wooden stick. The beggar was curled up on the ground, hugging something tightly. He did not make a sound even though he was being whipped by the fat man. The beggar's hair was long, messy, and dirty. His face could not be seen. The fat man stepped on the beggar and scolded, "How dare you steal from me?" Tui, as he spoke, he continued whipping the beggar with the wooden stick. At that moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared before the fat man. When he saw Yi Xian, a hint of wariness appeared in the fat man's eyes, because Yi Xian's attire told him that he was not a normal person, and he even had a sword with him. Yi Xian crouched down before the beggar and gently pushed aside the beggar's messy hair. When he saw the beggar's face, he was instantly stunned. It was a little girl. But her face was very dirty, and there were even wounds on it. The little girl was terrified. She hugged the thing in her hands tightly and her body trembled. "Don't hit me. It hurts," Yi Xian asked softly. "What's your name?" The little girl cast a glance at Yi Xian and lowered her head slightly. Her lips moved, but she did not say anything. Yi Xian said gently, "Don't be afraid, I won't hit you." The little girl lifted her head slightly. She cast a glance at Yi Xian, but soon lowered her head and said in a voice as soft as a mosquito, "Nian. Nian. My name is Nian Nian." Hearing this, Yi Xian instantly felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He was petrified on the spot. In the little girl's arms was a fish that was still jumping. The little girl hugged the fish tightly, and she was terrified. Chapter 1395. Nian Nian. Yi Xian looked at the little girl in front of him as if he had lost his soul. Sister Nian? This thought flashed through Yi Xian's mind. However, the little girl in front of him looked completely different from Sister Nian. However, he felt that this little girl looked familiar. This was also the reason why he had stopped in his tracks. At this moment, the fat man suddenly said, "Who are you?" As he spoke, he constantly tapped his palm with the wooden stick as if he was threatening her. Yi Xian was about to speak when the little girl suddenly hugged her knees and buried her head in them. She said with a trembling voice, "Don't hit me. It hurts." A ruthless glint flashed through the fat man's eyes. He was about to grab the little girl's hair when a sword suddenly pierced through his forehead. Hiss. Blood splattered. The expressions of the people on the street changed drastically as they retreated. Yi Xian ignored everyone. He squatted in front of the little girl and said gently, "Don't worry, no one will hit you." The little girl seemed to be very afraid. She curled up into a ball, but she kept hugging her fish. Even when she was being beaten up badly, she didn't let go of the fish. Yi Xian felt his heart ache for some reason when he saw that the little girl was still very afraid. As if he had thought of something, he pressed his palm gently against the ground. In an instant, a ball of fire appeared on the ground. Yi Xian gently crooked his index finger, and a fish flew into his hand from a bucket in the distance. He cleaned the fish quickly and then started to grill it. Soon, the fragrance of fish wafted through the air. At this moment, the little girl raised her head slightly. When she saw the roasted fish in Yi Xian's hand, she blinked, but she quickly buried her head in her lap. Clearly, she was still very afraid. Yi Xian hurriedly took out some seasonings and placed them on the roasted fish. Soon, the roasted fish became even more fragrant. The little girl would steal a glance at the roasted fish from time to time. Yi Xian handed the roasted fish to Nian Nian and said gently, "Here, this is for you." The little girl raised her head and looked at Yi Xian. Her throat rolled, but she did not dare to take it. Yi Xian smiled and said gently, "Don't be afraid. With me around, no one will dare to hit you." After hesitating for a while, the little girl slowly reached for the grilled fish. Yi Xian tried his best to make his smile amiable. He had never been so cautious before. The little girl held onto the grilled fish and Yi Xian immediately let go. The little girl's throat rolled and she was about to eat when Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Be careful, it's hot." As he spoke, he quickly blew on the grilled fish. The little girl glanced at Yi Xian and took a bite. When the fish entered her mouth, she blinked and quickly took a few more bites. At the side, Yi Xian squatted down and looked at the little girl in front of her. "Is that Sister Nian?" Yi Xian didn't know. But he hoped so. Soon, the little girl finished the grilled fish. Yi Xian blinked. "Do you want more?" The little girl nodded. Yi Xian hurriedly continued grilling. Soon, he handed the grilled fish to the little girl. "Here." The little girl glanced at Yi Xian. There was no longer any fear in her eyes. The little girl took the grilled fish and seemed to have thought of something. She tore off a piece of fish and handed it to Yi Xian. Her hands were very, very dirty. Yi Xian's heart ached when he saw this. He took the piece of fish and put it in his mouth. After eating it, he blinked and smiled. "I want more." The little girl looked at Yi Xian. Xian blinked, and then she tore off another piece of fish and gave it to Yi Xian. After Yi Xian finished eating, he looked at the grilled fish in the little girl's hand. The little girl hesitated for a moment, then tore off another piece of fish and gave it to Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian didn't take it. He pointed at the fish in the little girl's arms. At this moment, the fish was already dead. The little girl understood what Yi Xian meant. She hesitated for a while and then handed the fish to Yi Xian. After Yi Xian cleaned the fish, he started grilling it. Soon, Yi Xian finished grilling the fish and shared it with the little girl. At this moment, the little girl was no longer wary of him. After eating the fish, Yi Xian suddenly stood up and extended his hand to the little girl. He smiled and said, "Let's go home." Home. The little girl was stunned. Then, she lowered her head slightly. Yi Xian smiled and said, "I'll grill fish for you for the rest of your life." The little girl looked up at Yi Xian. She just looked at Yi Xian with a confused look in her eyes. Yi Xian looked at the little girl with a smile. His hand was still extended in the same way. A moment later, the little girl suddenly extended her hand and placed it in Yi Xian's. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Let's go." Just as the little girl was about to stand up, she seemed to have affected her wounds. She immediately gasped and looked at Yi Xian with tears in her eyes. "It hurts." Looking at the little girl who was covered in injuries, Yi Xian felt like a knife was being twisted in his heart. He hurriedly squatted down and took out a pill for the little girl. "Here, take it." The little girl didn't refuse. She opened her mouth and swallowed the pill. Very quickly, the pill transformed into a pure energy that spread throughout her body. In a short while, all the injuries on her body had basically recovered. The little girl moved her hands. Then she lifted her head to look at Yi Xian. The shocked look on her face was very cute. Yi Xian smiled and said, "It's amazing, right?" The little girl nodded vigorously. Yi Xian laughed and pulled the little girl's hand. "Let's go home." The little girl nodded. She held onto Yi Xian's hand tightly as if she was afraid that Yi Xian would run away. Yi Xian pulled the little girl and slowly walked into the distance. At this moment, Yi Jiming's voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind, "She is." Yi Xian said softly in his heart, "I know." Yi Jiming said solemnly, "Now I understand something." Yi Xian asked, "What is it?" Yi Jiming said, "She was born because of the fifth dimension and then died because of the fifth dimension. If I'm not wrong, she was able to be reborn because you cured the fifth dimension." The fifth dimension. The current fifth dimension was unprecedentedly good. Not only were there more than 160 dragon veins, there were also more than 10,000 heaven and earth spirits. Other than that, under Yi Xian's management, there were no more wars in the fifth dimension. No super experts dared to fight in the fifth dimension. Moreover, Yi Xian also brought back some top grade or veins. These top grade or veins could also nourish the heaven and earth. Under such circumstances, not only had the fifth dimension's tribulation completely disappeared, the origin of the fifth dimension, which was the origin spirit, had also been restored. At this moment, Yi Jiming said again, "The origin of the fifth dimension has been restored and the fifth dimension's tribulation has also disappeared. In other words, there is no need for her to suppress it. It was this universe that allowed her to be reborn. However, what I don't understand is why she lost her memories and doesn't have any power." Yi Xian looked at the little girl beside him. He was also very curious. He could now confirm that this little girl was Sister Nian. However, why did Sister Nian lose her memories? Not only that, she also completely lost her power. Could it be because of her previous injuries? At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. Not far away from him stood an old man. Bai Emperor's son. Bai Dizzy just stared at the little girl beside Yi Xian. The little girl was somewhat afraid and hurriedly hid behind Yi Xian. Bai Dizzy gave Yi Xian a deep look before turning to leave. Yi Xian was silent. He knew that Bai Dizzy already knew that the little girl behind him was Sister Nian. At this moment, Qing Yaoyao suddenly appeared not far away from Yi Xian. She looked at the little girl who only had her head poked out from behind Yi Xian in silence. Yi Xian looked at Qing Yaoyao, not saying anything. After a moment, Qing Yaoyao softly said, "Have you thought about the consequences?" Yi Xian smiled. "What consequences?" Qing Yaoyao looked at Yi Xian. "They won't let her recover her memories and strength. They will do it at all costs." Yi Xian smiled. "Then what about the Dao Tomb?" Qing Yaoyao shook her head. "I don't know. Her appearance will make everyone wary of you." With that, she glanced at the little girl behind Yi Xian. Take care. With that, she sighed softly and turned to leave. She didn't expect this fifth dimension Tendo to still be alive. No, it should be rebirth. This rebirth was definitely not a good thing for Yi Xian. This was because Mu Niannian had not only lost her memories, but also her strength. Would doubting help Mu Niannian recover her memories? Would doubting help Mu Niannian recover her strength? No. Doubting would kill this little girl at all costs. At all costs. On the field, Yi Xian was silent. He naturally understood what Qing Yao Yao meant. He originally needed time to develop, but now he didn't have any. At this moment, the little girl suddenly tugged at Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian smiled. He looked at the little girl. Don't worry. With me here, no one can hurt you. No one. With that, he squatted down and smiled. Come, I'll carry you home. The little girl blinked, then shook her head. Dirty. Yi Xian smiled. Nian Nian isn't dirty at all. With that, he bent his body. The little girl hesitated, then climbed onto Yi Xian's back. Yi Xian carried the little girl and walked away slowly. On the way, Yi Xian suddenly asked, Nian Nian, do you remember what happened in the past? The little girl shook her head. I don't remember. Yi Xian asked, not at all? The little girl was silent. Yi Xian asked, just a little? The little girl pressed her head against Yi Xian's back and said softly, I think I had a dream. That dream was very long, but I don't remember many things in the dream. But? Yi Xian hurriedly asked, but what? The little girl glanced at Yi Xian and said softly, I think you were in that dream. Yi Xian was stunned. Then, he smiled. Really? The little girl nodded. Really? Yi Xian said with a smile, am I good or bad in your dream? The little girl thought about it and said, in the dream, you were always causing trouble. I don't remember anything else. Yi Xian slowly walked away with the little girl on his back. He didn't know when, but his cheeks were covered in tears. P.S. I also had a dream. In the dream, I was first in the monthly votes. There were so many monthly votes. There were people fighting to vote for me every day. Chapter 1396. Yi Xian brought the little girl back to the sword hall where he lived. Guan Yin was also in the hall. Yi Xian brought the little girl to Guan Yin. He looked at Guan Yin and said, take her to clean up. Guan Yin nodded slightly. All right. With that, she stretched out her hand to the little girl. However, the little girl hid behind Yi Xian. Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian squatted down and grabbed the little girl's hands. He smiled and said, it's all right. Big sister is also a good person. She won't hurt you. The little girl glanced at Guan Yin and lowered her head slightly. Yi Xian gently rubbed the little girl's head and said softly, don't be afraid. Tell me who bullied you. I'll beat him to death. The little girl raised her head and looked at Yi Xian. She said softly, you, don't go. Yi Xian smiled. I won't go. Go take a bath with big sister and change into a nice set of clothes, okay? The little girl looked at her clothes. She hesitated for a long time before nodding. Yi Xian looked at Guan Yin. Guan Yin held the little girl's hand and walked towards the inner hall. Inside the hall, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and slowly closed his eyes. Yi Jiming suddenly said, what do you think Doubting will do next? Yi Xian didn't say anything. What will Doubting do? A moment later, Yi Xian left the sword hall and came to the fish stall where he first met Nian Nian. At this moment, there was no one here. Yi Xian walked to the fish stall. There was a corpse in front of the fish stall. It was the corpse of the fishmonger. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian opened his palm and the soul-suppressing sword appeared in his hand. The next moment, the soul-suppressing sword trembled slightly and a shadow floated out. It was the soul of the fishmonger who had whipped Nian Nian. He had used the soul-suppressing sword to kill the fishmonger. Although the soul-suppressing sword had absorbed the fishmonger's soul, it hadn't completely digested it. Thus, his soul was still there. Seeing Yi Xian, the fishmonger hurriedly kowtowed and said with a trembling voice. Spare me, spare me." Yi Xian looked at the fishmonger. "It was Nian Nian's fault for stealing your fish. It was my fault for killing you." As he spoke, he opened his palm, and then pressed it lightly towards fishmonger. Very soon, a mysterious force enveloped fishmonger, and gradually, fishmonger's soul entered his body. Not long after, fishmonger slowly opened his eyes. He looked at the sky with slight confusion, and he found it hard to believe that he was still alive. As if he had thought of something, the fishmonger hurriedly got up. He knelt before Yi Xian and kowtowed as if pounding garlic. "Thank you, Immortal, for not killing me. Thank you, Immortal, for not killing me." Yi Xian opened his palm. A black scroll and a bottle of pills landed in front of the fishmonger. "This is a cultivation technique. If you cultivate this technique, it shouldn't be difficult for you to live for 100 years. Sister Nian ate one of your fish, and I gave you a fortune. We're even." As he spoke, he turned and left. Behind him, the fishmonger was still kowtowing crazily. However, at this moment, he wasn't afraid, but excited and agitated. After Yi Xian left the city gate, he suddenly said, "Come." As his voice fell, a shadow appeared beside him and bowed respectfully. Yi Xian said softly, "Secretly observe him. If he's evil, kill him. If he's good, help him." The shadow bowed respectfully. "Yes." As he spoke, he quietly disappeared. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. "Sister Nian, we don't owe anyone anything, even if it's a fish." After he finished speaking, he also disappeared. Heaven Realm Abyss, Heavenly Palace. Inside the palace, Bai Dizzy sat on a chair and did not speak for a long time. He had been sitting for a full 2 hours. During this time, he did not say a word. Next to him, True Martial Divine Lord and White Robe's expressions were extremely grave. They did not expect that Mu Niannian had been reborn. Reborn. That woman was not Yi Xian. Yi Xian's threat was in the future, but that woman's threat was now. Now that the fifth dimension had recovered its vitality, there was no need for her to suppress it. What did this mean? It meant that once she recovered her memories, she would be in her peak state. How terrifying would a peak fifth dimension Tendo be? Could she instantly kill a Dao ancestor? Most likely. As they thought of this, the three people's expressions became even uglier. At this moment, Bai Dizzy suddenly said softly, "She has lost her memories. She has lost her strength." White Robe and True Martial looked at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy slowly closed his eyes. In other words, the current her has no strength at all. Hearing this, True Martial narrowed his eyes, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. If Mu Niannian was in her peak state, even if everyone in the Daoting joined forces, they would not be her opponent. However, she had lost her memories and strength. Right now, she was just an ordinary little girl. A little girl who could be killed with a flick of a finger. At this moment, White Robe suddenly said, "This matter cannot be delayed." Bai Dizzy nodded. Their top priority now was to get rid of Mu Niannian as soon as possible. Otherwise, who knew when she would regain her memories and strength? Perhaps it would be tomorrow. True Martial suddenly said, "There is another problem. The Dao Tomb." Bai Dizzy stood up. "I will go talk to them." True Martial looked at Bai Dizzy. What if they can't come to an agreement? Bai Dizzy did not even turn his head. "Then we will all perish together." True Martial, White Robe, gather all the experts in the Daoting. Remember, all of them. With that, he had already disappeared into the distance. Dao Tomb City. Bai Dizzy came to the Dao Tomb City alone. He had just entered when Luo Ho appeared in front of him. "K Yao Yao, Bitter King, and Jean Man were also there. Bai Dizzy went straight to the point. Mu Niannian's death is beneficial to both of us. Kei Yao Yao smiled. It's beneficial to the doubting, right? Bai Dizzy looked at Kei Yao Yao. Yao Yao, does the Dao Tomb really want to see such a powerful person appear? The corners of Kei Yao Yao's mouth curled up. Why not? Her appearance is not detrimental to us. On the contrary, if she regains her memories and strength, the first person she will kill will be the doubting, right? Bai Dizzy smiled. Then let's not talk about it. Perish together. With that, he turned and disappeared into the horizon. Perish together. The smile on Kei Yao Yao's face gradually faded. She knew that the doubting was not joking. Because the doubting had no way out. If they did not get rid of Mu Niannian now, once Mu Niannian regained her memories and strength, the doubting's life would be in the hands of Mu Niannian. It could be said that they would kill Mu Niannian at all costs. Even if they had to perish together with the Dao Tomb. At this moment, Luo Ho suddenly said, "We cannot interfere." Kei Yao Yao looked at Luo Ho. Luo Ho said softly, "The doubting is already desperate." Kei Yao Yao was silent. Luo Ho looked at Kei Yao Yao. "What do you think?" Kei Yao Yao said, "We have two choices. The first is to watch from the sidelines and let the doubting and Yi Xian fight to the death while we reap the benefits." Luo Ho said, "The second?" Kei Yao Yao said, "The second is to help Yi Xian fight the doubting until Mu Niannian regains her memories and strength." The Bitter King suddenly said, "What are the benefits?" Kei Yao Yao said, "The benefit is to form an alliance with the fifth dimension, a true alliance. In the future, we will have a powerful ally." The Bitter King shook his head. Luo Ho also shook his head. Ally? They never believed in allies. Moreover, at that time, Mu Niannian's fifth dimension would be suppressing the Dao Tomb. Just as the White Emperor's son had said, they did not wish for someone as powerful as Mu Niannian to appear. Kei Yao Yao was silent. She already knew everyone's choice. For now, the first choice was the most suitable for the Dao Tomb. Wouldn't it be better to let Yi Xian and the doubting fight to the death? After all, the Dao Tomb did not need to do anything and they could reap the benefits. If Yi Xian lost, the Dao Tomb would not suffer any losses. If the doubting lost, it would be a great thing for the Dao Tomb. At this moment, Kei Yao Yao suddenly said, "I will go to the fifth dimension." She was about to leave when Luo Ho suddenly said, "Celestial Monarch." Yi Xian turned to look at Luo Ho and smiled, "You can't be too ruthless." "What do you think?" Luo Ho was silent for a moment, then said, "Have a sense of propriety." Kei Yao Yao did not say anything else and disappeared into the horizon. In the fifth dimension. In the Sword Hall, Guan Yin walked out with the little girl. At this moment, the little girl looked completely different. Her hair had been tied into a braid by Guan Yin. She looked extremely cute. The little girl's appearance was completely different from Sister Nian, but Yi Xian knew that she was Sister Nian. When she saw Yi Xian, Nian ran to his side and grabbed his arm. She looked up at Yi Xian and said, "Eat fish." "Eat fish." Yi Xian laughed, "Let's go, I will roast fish for you." After saying this, he pulled Nian out of the hall. Inside the hall, Guan Yin was silent, his expression extremely solemn. Sister Nian's rebirth was naturally a great thing for the fifth dimension. However, there was a fatal problem, and that was that Sister Nian had lost her memories and power. At this time, would the doubting give Sister Nian time? Of course not. The doubting would definitely kill Sister Nian at all costs. The fifth dimension would not be peaceful anymore. Yi Xian brought Nian to a river. This was the place where he and Mu Niannian had first met. At that time, he did not know that this woman was the Tendo of the fifth dimension. Qing was also there at that time. After Yi Xian caught a few fish from the river, he looked at Nian and said with a smile, "Which one do you like?" Nian pointed at the largest one with her little finger. Yi Xian laughed. He cleaned up the fish quickly and started a fire to roast it. Nian Nian walked to Yi Xian's side and sat down next to Yi Xian, her eyes fixed on the roasted fish in front of her. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Nian Nian, why were you on the street?" Nian Nian shook her head. "I don't know." Yi Xian turned to look at Nian Nian. "Don't you remember why you were on the street?" Nian Nian nodded. Yi Xian was silent. Nian Nian's last memory should be on that street. Yi Xian turned to look at Nian Nian. Nian Nian hugged Yi Xian's arm with both hands and said softly, Can I always follow you?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Of course you can." Nian Nian looked at Yi Xian. "Really?" Yi Xian nodded. "Really? I'll roast fish for you every day from now on." Nian Nian looked at Yi Xian and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. Soon, the fish was roasted. Yi Xian lay on the ground and looked at the sky. At this moment, he felt that life was really beautiful. Sister Nian was still here. At this moment, he was also very glad that he had not done something stupid back then and had properly treated the fifth dimension. The current fifth dimension had never been better, and the creatures of the fifth dimension had never been more united. If Sister Nian recovered her memories and saw the current fifth dimension, how happy would she be? Thinking of this, Yi Xian could not help but feel a little proud. At this moment, Nian Nian suddenly said, "It's done." After saying that, she picked up the roasted fish, tore off a piece of fish, and handed it to Yi Xian's mouth. "Eat." Yi Xian laughed and bit the piece of fish. Nian Nian blinked. "Is it delicious?" Yi Xian nodded and said seriously, "Of course it's delicious. Don't you see who roasted the fish?" Nian Nian giggled. Bullsh *T. Yi Xian laughed. At this moment, an old man suddenly appeared by the river. The person who had come was Bai Dizzy. Yi Xian glanced at Bai Dizzy and continued eating the fish. Nian Nian was a little wary. She hugged Yi Xian's arm tightly. Bai Dizzy looked at Nian Nian. "I miscalculated. I should have destroyed your main body back then." The fifth dimension Tendo was not a human. She was born for the fifth dimension and died for the fifth dimension. Her life was closely related to the fifth dimension. As long as the fifth dimension did not perish, she could live because of the fifth dimension. Of course, the most important thing was that her strength was still there. Her main body was also there. Although her soul had scattered between heaven and earth, it had not shattered. The fifth dimension had condensed her soul again. Yi Xian turned to look at Nian Nian and said with a smile, "Don't be afraid. I'm here." Nian Nian nodded slightly and hugged Yi Xian's arm tightly. In the distance, Bai Dizzy looked at Yi Xian. "Yi Xian, give her to us. Otherwise, Dao Ting, will destroy you." Yi Xian looked at Bai Dizzy and said with a smile, "Come on." Chapter 1397. By the river, Bai Dizzy just stared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. "Doubting. If you want to die together with me, Yi Xian, will welcome you at any time." Bai Dizzy chuckled. "Do you think the Dao Tomb land will help you?" Yi Xian, you. Yi Xian suddenly looked at Bai Dizzy. Scram. With that, he picked up the sword beside him and slashed out. In the distance, Bai Dizzy's pupils suddenly shrank. He disappeared on the spot and reappeared tens of thousands of li away. By the river, Yi Xian shook his head. It wasn't that he didn't want to kill Bai Dizzy, but that this person wasn't easy to kill. This person might not be good at fighting, but he was first-rate at escaping. As soon as he slashed out with his sword, Bai Dizzy was already tens of thousands of li away. Even the sword chi couldn't catch up. At this moment, Nian Nian, who was beside Yi Xian, suddenly said, Why does he want to kill me?" Yi Xian collected his thoughts. He looked at Nian Nian and smiled. "Don't be afraid. I'm here." Nian Nian nodded. "All right, Yi Xian pulled Nian Nian to get up and leave. At this moment, Qin Yaoyao suddenly appeared in front of the two. Qin Yaoyao glanced at Nian Nian and then at Yi Xian. Let's talk. Yi Xian smiled. Let's talk. The three walked along the river into the distance. On the way, Qin Yaoyao said softly, the Dao Tomb Land has decided not to interfere. Yi Xian nodded. I guessed it. Qin Yaoyao turned to look at Yi Xian. Is the person behind you going to appear? Yi Xian smiled. No. Qin Yaoyao looked at Yi Xian. Then what do you have to rely on? Yi Xian said softly, I don't have anything to rely on. It's just my life. Qin Yaoyao stared at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian smiled and said, I'm telling the truth. After a moment of silence, Yan Yaoyao looked at Nian Nian. Nian Nian was a little timid and hid behind Yi Xian. Qin Yaoyao softly said, you must help her recover her memories and strength as soon as possible. Yi Xian shook his head. Let nature take its course. He also wanted Nian Nian to recover her memory and strength, but this matter could not be rushed. Moreover, he had no other way. This matter could only rely on Nian Nian himself. Qin Yaoyao looked at Yi Xian. Are you really going to risk your life? Yi Xian smiled and said, do I have any other way? Feng Yaoyao was silent. Yi Xian suddenly said, Miss Yaoyao should have other matters to discuss today, right? After a long silence, Qin Yaoyao opened her palm and an ancient scroll appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian was a little curious. This is? Qi Yaoyao said, Doubting's information. The number of Doubting's experts and trump cards are basically all inside. Of course, I can't be sure if Doubting has other trump cards, but Doubting's experts are basically all inside. Yi Xian put away the scroll. Thank you. Qin Yaoyao shook her head. It's just a small favor. Saying that, she glanced at Nian Nian. Because of my position, I can't help you anymore. Take care. After saying that, her figure trembled and disappeared. In the same place, Yi Xian was silent. At this moment, a phantom suddenly appeared not far from Yi Xian. The phantom gradually solidified. It was a black-robed man. Yi Xian flicked his finger and a token appeared in front of the black-robed man. This black-robed man was none other than the mysterious person who had given him the ice coffin. The mysterious person looked at Yi Xian. I'll help you once. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, can you beat a Dao Attainment Realm expert? The mysterious person shook his head. I can't, but I can barely hold up a Dao Attainment Realm expert. Yi Xian nodded. That's enough. After saying that, he pulled Nian Nian away. In the same place, the mysterious person was silent for a long time before saying softly, Doubting. Are you really going to bully his son? How dare you? After saying that, he disappeared without a sound. At the end of the distance, Nian Nian held Yi Xian's hand tightly. Is someone coming to beat us up? Yi Xian smiled. Yes. Are you afraid? Nian Nian looked at Yi Xian and asked, Are you afraid? Yi Xian blinked. A little. Nian Nian hesitated for a moment before saying, Then I'm a little afraid too. Yi Xian laughed. After a moment, Nian Nian said again, Are they going to beat me up? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Nian Nian said, Will you protect me? Yi Xian said, Yes. Nian Nian said, What if you can't beat them? Yi Xian said, What do you think I should do? Nian Nian said, If you hand me over, will they stop beating you up? Yi Xian said, No, their goal is to kill you and then kill me. After a long time, Nian Nian said again, Why are you protecting me? Yi Xian said, There's no reason. I just want to protect you. Nian Nian said softly, But there should be a reason for everything. Yi Xian said, Because I like you, so I'm protecting you. Is that a good reason? Nian Nian stopped in her tracks. She looked at Yi Xian and asked seriously, "Do you really like me?" Yi Xian nodded. Nian Nian asked again, "Why?" Yi Xian was speechless. Nian Nian said, "Why do you like me?" "There must be a reason." Yi Xian asked, "Why do you like eating fish?" Nian Nian said, "If you like it, then eat it." "There's no reason." Yi Xian smiled and said, "I like you like fish. If I like you, then I like you. There's no reason." Nian Nian said, "But I'm not a fish." After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, "Why don't we change the topic?" Nian Nian said, "All right." Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Nian Nian said, "What do you like about me?" Yi Xian said, "I like everything." Nian Nian said, "Why do you like everything?" "I like eating fish, but I don't like fish bones. There must be something about me that you don't like." Yi Xian fell silent. Nian Nian said, "Why?" Yi Xian said, "I don't like it when you lie to me." Nian Nian blinked. "Have I ever lied to you?" Yi Xian nodded. "In my dream, we went to a place. You lied to me and said that we would definitely come back together, but you didn't." Nian Nian held Yi Xian's hand and said with some heartache, "Don't be angry. I won't lie to you next time." Yi Xian smiled and said, "It's a deal." Nian Nian said seriously, "Definitely." Soon, the two of them disappeared at the end of the river hand in hand. In the sky above the fifth dimension, Yin Yao Yao looked down and remained silent. Beside her was Luo Hua. Luo Hua said in a deep voice, "The Tao Ting has already gathered all the experts. Everyone who is in seclusion, except for the Tao ancestors, has already rushed to the heaven abyss." Yin Yao Yao was silent. Luo Hua said, "The Tao Ting is going to destroy everything this time. They will kill Mu Niannian at all costs." Saying so, he looked at Yin Yao Yao. "Heavenly Monarch, I know you love talent, but this Yi Xian is a huge whirlpool. Our Tao burial mound cannot be dragged into this whirlpool, or we will be consigned to eternal damnation." Yin Yao Yao nodded. "I understand." Luo Hua sighed. "To be honest, I also admire this Yi Xian. Unfortunately, he is not from our Tao burial mound." Yin Yao Yao suddenly said, "Luo Hua, do you think our Tao burial mound should change?" Luo Hua looked at Yin Yao Yao. "What do you want to change?" Yin Yao Yao smiled. "What are we fighting for?" Luo Hua was silent. Yin Yao Yao looked at Luo Hua. "We are fighting for our own interests. Back then, we became Tao breakers because the great Tao was unfair. We fought for the beliefs in our hearts. But now, our Tao burial mound has lost its beliefs. No one is fighting for their own interests. If we destroy the Tao Ting, we will be the next Tao Ting." Luo Hua said nothing. Yin Yao Yao said softly, "Our original intentions. We don't know when, but we have forgotten our original intentions. Why can't anyone create a new path on the path of Tao breakers? Because we are no different from the Tao Ting in the first place." With that, she turned and left. Luo Hua said in a low voice, "Where are you going?" In the distance, Qi Yao Yao didn't even look back. "Follow my heart." With that, she disappeared into the distance. Luo Hua was silent. Yi Xian didn't bring Nian Nian back to the sword hall. Instead, he brought her to the fourth dimension, the Nether Hall. Yi Xian came to this place again. The hall was deserted with only a few statues. Yi Xian looked at the statues and said softly, "Is anyone there?" No response. Yi Xian was silent for a long time. Then, he turned and left with Nian Nian. Outside the hall, Yi Xian wasn't disappointed. He didn't put his hopes on others. It was naturally good for him to find a helper, but it didn't matter if he couldn't. Meanwhile, a voice suddenly resounded within the hall. "Is there something you need?" Yi Xian turned around and looked into the hall, but there was no one there. Yi Xian bowed slightly. "May I know who it is?" The voice resounded once more. Is there something you need? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, Does Senior know about doubting? The voice replied, I don't. Yi Xian was speechless. The voice spoke again. Is there something you need? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, Senior, can you help me with something? The voice fell silent for a moment before it said, What is it? Yi Xian said, Fight. The voice fell silent. Yi Xian waited silently for an answer. After a long time, the voice resounded once more. Someone has told me. I don't want to help you. Yi Xian blinked. Who? Who? The voice replied, Someone you know. Yi Xian was quite stunned. Someone I know? Could it be that mysterious expert within Yi Ling's body? Or perhaps it's that woman with the spear? Meanwhile, the voice spoke again. Your path is very long, and you have to walk it yourself. The path you walk is the path that belongs to you. Do you understand what I mean? Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. Senior, doubting wants to gang up on me. There are many of them. The voice replied, Deal with it yourself. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, Can you help me a little? The voice replied, No. Yi Xian laughed miserably. Forget it. In any case, I've been orphaned since I was young, and I've had to endure all sorts of disasters. Alas, let's not talk about it. It's meaningless to talk about it. In any case, I'm an orphan. I'll get used to it. I'll get used to it. As he spoke, he pulled Nian Nian towards the distance. At this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from within the hall. Wait. P.S. Thank you for your monthly votes and tips, thank you. Thank you for your support. I'm going to buy a car soon. Do you have any suggestions? A two-wheeled one. Chapter 1398. Outside the Nether Palace, Yi Xian stopped in his tracks. At this moment, the voice sounded from inside the palace. We are too far away from here, do you understand what I mean? Yi Xian was silent. At this moment, the voice sounded again. No one knew what the voice said, but Yi Xian suddenly looked happy. He bowed slightly to the Nether Palace, then turned around and left with Nian Nian. Yi Xian returned to the fifth dimension with Nian Nian, and at this moment, the fifth dimension was on full alert. Yi Xian arrived at the Sword Sect, where hundreds of swordsmen from the Sword Sect were already waiting. All the swordsmen had reached the self-release realm. Although they were only at the self-release realm, they had the strength to fight Dao Validation realm. But this was not enough. Yi Xian found Senior Sister Lu and took out a storage ring and handed it to her. Senior Sister Lu looked at Yi Xian, What's inside? Yi Xian smiled, Look. Senior Sister Lu glanced at it, and the next moment, her expression changed drastically. Inside the storage ring were some divine objects. Those were the treasures of the Jialong clan. Among them, there were countless treasures of the Dao Validation realm. Although there were few treasures of the Dao Validation realm, there were still some. After all, Yi Xian's soul-suppressing sword was only at the Dao Validation realm. Senior Sister Lu looked at Yi Xian, Where did you go to rob? Yi Xian smiled, A senior gave it to me. After a moment of silence, Senior Sister Lu said, With this equipment, my sword sect swordsman can kill Dao Validation realm. Gu Nian and the others can kill Dao Validation realm. Yi Xian nodded, Okay. After saying that, he turned around and left with Nian Nian. At this moment, Senior Sister Lu suddenly said, Are you confident? Yi Xian stopped and turned to look at Senior Sister Lu, smiling, No. Senior Lu fell silent. Yi Xian gently rubbed Nian Nian's little head and said with a smile, Senior Martial Sister, can you summon the Patriarch of the Sword Sect? Senior Sister Lu shook her head. Yi Xian shrugged. Others can summon their ancestors. Senior Sister Lu, you should also summon your ancestor. Senior Apprentice Sister Lu glared at Yi Xian. Scram. Yi Xian laughed and left with Nian Nian. Yi Xian brought Nian Nian to the sword hall. He took out the world prison pagoda. At this moment, a woman appeared in front of him. Najialu. He was the last dragon of the Jia dragon clan. Jialo looked at Yi Xian. I want to cultivate a Dao body. Can I? Yi Xian blinked. Can you cultivate? Jialo nodded. Grandfather said that I can cultivate, but he doesn't think he will give it to me. Yi Xian smiled and said, I'll teach. Jialo looked at Yi Xian. Really? Yi Xian nodded. But you have to help me fight. Jialo took out a stick of tanghulu and licked it. Then, he said, no problem. Next, Yi Xian began to teach Jialo the Dao body. In fact, if time allowed, he wanted to teach Lanxiu and the others the Dao body. Unfortunately, time did not allow it. Moreover, the Dao body was not easy to cultivate. This was because Lanxiu and the others had weak physical bodies. The reason he could cultivate it so quickly was because his physical body's foundation was very, very strong. In the five-dimensional universe, there was almost no one whose physical body had reached his level. Of course, Jialo was one of them. She was a member of the dragon clan, so her physical body was naturally strong. Once she cultivated a Dao body and reached the Dao defense realm, the strength of her physical body would definitely be above his. If Jialo could cultivate a Dao body, she would definitely be able to fight a Dao realization realm expert. Even if she could not win, she would definitely be able to fight a Dao realization realm expert. In the following time, Yi Xian taught Jialo the Dao body every day to accompany Nian Nian. Of course, he did not forget about Dao Ting. In a certain hall, Yi Xian sat to the side and roasted fish. Beside him was Nian Nian, and in front of him stood a black-robed old man. The black-robed old man bowed slightly to Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, doubting experts have already rushed to the celestial abyss. I'm afraid they will come to the five-dimensional universe in the next few days. Young Master Yi, please make early preparations. Yi Xian said, how many in total? The black-robed old man looked at Yi Xian. Anyone who has reached the Dao confirmation realm has gone to the celestial abyss. In addition, this time, Dao Ting will probably use some trump cards that have never been used before. Also, that Dao ancestor is very likely to appear. Young Master Yi, you must make early preparations. Yi Xian was silent. The black-robed old man cupped his fists. If Dao Ting makes any new moves, this old man will inform young Master Yi immediately. Goodbye. After saying that, he was about to leave. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, thank the Celestial King for me. The black-robed old man nodded. This old man will definitely deliver it. After saying that, he disappeared. In the hall, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. At this time, Nian Nian suddenly said softly, are they all here to beat me? Yi Xian shook his head. No, they're all here to beat me. Nian Nian looked at Yi Xian. You lied to me. Yi Xian said with a smile, all right. They're all here to beat me. Nian Nian blinked. Why? Just because I stole the fish? But I'm really hungry. I won't steal fish next time. Yi Xian gently rubbed Nian Nian's head and said softly, what's a mere fish? Our entire fifth dimension owes her. If not for Sister Nian, would the fifth dimension still exist? It probably wouldn't even exist anymore. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the entire fifth dimension owes her. At this time, Guan Yin walked in. Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian. The fifth dimension is ready. Yi Xian said, the battlefield cannot be in the fifth dimension. Guan Yin nodded. If the battlefield was in the fifth dimension, once a fight broke out, regardless of whether the fifth dimension won or lost, it would still suffer heavy losses. Guan Yin said in a deep voice, but their goal is not only to kill Miss Nian, but also to destroy the fifth dimension. Yi Xian was silent. The current Dao Ting must have learned to be smart. Killing Sister Nian was not enough. If they wanted to get rid of future troubles, they had to destroy the entire fifth dimension. As long as the entire fifth dimension was destroyed, there would be no possibility of Sister Nian being reborn. At this time, Guan Yin said softly, "It would be great if Miss Nian could regain her memory." The current fifth dimension no longer needed Mu Niannian to suppress it. Once Mu Niannian regained her memory, Dao Ting and the Dao Tomb would be like ants to her. Therefore, Dao Ting would definitely destroy the fifth dimension. But would Sister Nian regain her memory? Yi Xian glanced at Nian Nian next to him. He was not sure either. Sister Nian had really forgotten everything in the past. As for when she would regain her memory, no one knew. Yi Xian was silent for a moment before smiling. "It's okay, I'll take care of it this time." Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian. "Can you take care of it?" Yi Xian smiled. "Don't we still have you?" Guan Yin was stunned for a moment before smiling. "Let's take care of it together." Yi Xian said, "Have Ajiao and Arrow come out of seclusion?" Guan Yin said in a low voice, "Soon." Yi Xian nodded. "That's good." After explaining some matters to Guan Yin left. Yi Xian continued to roast fish, but his thoughts had already drifted away. Dao Ting had 2 Dao realm experts. One was a Dao ancestor, and the other had disappeared for many years. Even the Dao Tomb did not know who he was. And now, the only ones who could kill Yi Xian single-handedly were powerhouses at the Dao attainment realm. If he used the power of his bloodline, he might be able to fight a Dao realm expert head-on. It should be a 3 to 7 chance. But if Dao Ting and 2 Dao realm experts attacked together, he would not stand a chance. 2 Dao realm experts were definitely not people he could fight against at the moment. After all, only his physical body had reached the Dao Imperial realm. His realm had not reached the Dao Imperial realm. Fighting 1 Dao realm expert would be difficult, let alone 2. Apart from the experts of the Dao realm, if Jianghu and the white-robed experts ganged up on him, he would not have much confidence in winning. These 2 people were infinitely close to the Dao realm. This time, Dao Ting would definitely not give him a chance. They would definitely choose to gang up on him. And now, there were basically no other people in the fifth dimension, especially Dao Imperial realm experts. Dao Ting Divine Lords, however, had a total of 76. What did this mean? This was equivalent to a total of 76 Dao Manipulation realm experts in the Dao court. Dao Ting Dao realm experts below the Dao Imperial realm had a total of 167. 167. It could be said that in terms of lineup, Dao Ting had completely crushed the fifth dimension. Moreover, this was only the doubting strength on the surface. The Dao Tomb did not know whether Dao Ting had more trump cards. How could they fight? Inside the hall, Yi Xian was quietly roasting fish. At this moment, Nian Nian suddenly hugged Yi Xian's arm and said softly, "Did I drag you into this?" Yi Xian looked at Nian Nian and said with a smile, "No. I dragged you into this." Without him, Yi Xian, Sister Nian would not have fallen back then. Nian Nian looked up at Yi Xian. "Those dreams I had were not dreams, right?" Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Nian Nian had only lost her memory. In fact, she was not stupid at all. Nian Nian looked at Yi Xian. "I lost my memory. Am I right?" Yi Xian nodded. Nian Nian asked again, "Was I very powerful before?" Yi Xian laughed. "Powerful. Very, very powerful. It is known as the 4th sword in the world." Nian Nian blinked. "There are 3 more swords?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." Nian Nian lowered her head slightly. Yi Xian asked softly, "What's wrong?" Nian Nian hugged Yi Xian's arm tightly with both hands. "I can't remember anything." Yi Xian smiled and said, "It's okay. If you can't remember, don't force yourself to remember." Nian Nian looked at Yi Xian. "But I want to help." Yi Xian gently rubbed Nian Nian's little head. You've already helped me a lot. This time, let me help you once, okay? Nian Nian looked at Yi Xian and didn't say a word. At that moment, Yi Xian suddenly looked up. He saw a familiar old man in the starry sky. By Dizzy. He's here. In the hall, Yi Xian smiled. Then he pulled Nian Nian to her feet and walked out of the hall. Nian Nian held Yi Xian's hand. Can I call you brother? In the distance, Yi Xian shook his head. No. Nian Nian was a little puzzled. Why? Yi Xian said, I'm afraid that he'll hit me after he recovers his memories. Nian Nian blinked. Can't you beat me? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and was about to speak when Nian Nian suddenly said, You promised me. Don't lie to me. Yi Xian was a little helpless. I can't beat him. He might shatter my Dao body with one punch. Nian Nian giggled and held Yi Xian's hand tightly. Don't be afraid. I won't hit him in the future. Yi Xian hurriedly said, Keep your promise. Nian Nian said seriously, Pinky swear. As she spoke, she extended a finger. Yi Xian laughed. Then he also extended a finger. Just like that, the two fingers gently hooked together. Outside the hall, someone said, I'll protect you in the future. Chapter 1399. In the five-dimensional universe, in the starry sky, Bai Dizzy looked down at the five-dimensional universe with a calm expression. Mu Nian Nian. The moment he learned that Mu Nian Nian had been reborn, he really panicked. No, it was fear. Mu Nian Nian. This woman had shattered the physical body of a Dao ancestor with only 30% of her strength. Once this woman regained her memory, she could destroy Daoting in the blink of an eye. Fortunately, this woman had lost her memory and strength. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of Bai Dizzy. Beside Yi Xian was Nian Nian. Bai Dizzy glanced at Yi Xian, then at Nian Nian. This time, Nian Nian was not afraid. She looked at Bai Dizzy, her right hand holding Yi Xian's hand tightly. Bai Dizzy suddenly looked at Yi Xian. Just one person? Yi Xian smiled. Of course not. Bai Dizzy nodded. I'm looking forward to it. As soon as he finished speaking, the starry sky behind him suddenly split open. Then, countless powerful auras surged out like a tide. The first to come out were White Robe and Jianghu, and behind them stood 76 Sir Gods. All of them were Dao Defense Realm. And behind these 76 people, there were 167 Dao Validation Realm powerhouses. It could be said that all the powerhouses of Daoting had come out. This time, Daoting was fighting with its back to the wall. Although the strength of the five-dimensional universe was not as strong as Daoting, once Mu Nian Nian regained her memory, the situation would be reversed. Therefore, either Mu Nian Nian died, or Daoting perished. Bai Dizzy looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, you can call the person behind you out. Yi Xian nodded. He turned his head and saw a black-robed man not far away. It was the black-robed man who had given him the ice coffin. This man in black had a mysterious background. Yi Xian did not know his name, and he did not ask because the other party did not seem to want to have too much karma with him. This time, the other party was here to help fight. After the fight, the other party would probably leave. Bai Dizzy glanced at the man in black and then looked at Yi Xian. Anything else? Yi Xian smiled and said, Not for now. Bai Dizzy stared at Yi Xian. He suddenly felt uneasy. Because Yi Xian was too calm. Based on his understanding of Yi Xian, for this guy to be so calm, he definitely had something to rely on. But what did this guy have to rely on? The Dao tomb would no longer interfere. Did this guy really come from the Saha world? Bai Dizzy did not believe it at all. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Bai Dizzy, what are you waiting for? Bai Dizzy looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, Why don't you attack together? Bai Dizzy stared at Yi Xian. Deliberately mystifying. Then, he looked at the black-robed man not far away. "Your Excellency is?" The black-robed man said, "I'm helping him fight, that's all." Bai Dizzy was expressionless. "Your Excellency, no matter what price he offers, I will doubting double it." The black-robed man shook his head. "It has nothing to do with money." Bai Dizzy was about to say something when the black-robed man suddenly said, "Cut the crap." Then, he looked at Yi Xian. "Who should I fight?" Yi Xian pointed at Jianghu and White Robe in the distance. "Those two." The black-robed man said, "I can only hold them back." Yi Xian nodded. "That's enough." The black-robed man nodded. The next moment, he disappeared on the spot. In the distance, Jianghu looked at White Robe. "I'll hold him back." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly drew his sword and slashed forward. Chi! The sound of something tearing resounded. Boom! The space in front of Jianghu suddenly trembled violently. The next moment, he was blasted back dozens of feet. Seeing this scene, Bai Dizzy's expression darkened. This black-robed man was actually so strong. Jianghu gripped his sword tightly with his right hand. A powerful sword momentum gathered in his sword. At this moment, the black-robed man appeared in front of him again. The black-robed man threw a punch. A simple punch. A ruthless look flashed in Jianghu's eyes. He slashed with his sword. This sword seemed to be able to shatter the starry sky. Boom! The area where the two of them were exploded and turned into nothingness. White Robe didn't attack. Even though Jianghu was at a disadvantage, it was still very difficult for the black-robed man to kill Jianghu. White Robe looked at Yi Xian. He doesn't seem to be able to fight two at once. Yi Xian fell silent. At this moment, a sword howl resounded in the sky. In the next moment, a little girl suddenly appeared in front of White Robe. Shao Qi. Yi Xian looked at Shao Qi and was stunned. He said, "Shao Qi, didn't you go to the third dimension?" Shao Qi glanced at Yi Xian. "You're back." Yi Xian blinked. "Can you win?" Shao Qi said, "I'll give it a try." As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and slashed with her sword. This slash caused White Robe's brows to instantly knit together. It was a very powerful strike. In the distance, Bai Dizzy's expression instantly sank. Where did this little girl come from? Very quickly, Shao Qi and White Robe started fighting. The two of them were evenly matched. It had to be said that Yi Xian was a little shocked. Shao Qi was actually so strong. At this moment, Bai Dizzy suddenly looked at Yi Xian. Letting someone stall White Robe and Jianghu. Obviously, there is someone else, right? Yi Xian shook his head. There is no one else. Bai Dizzy stared at Yi Xian. Then, is everything going to end? Yi Xian smiled. Bai Dizzy, I'll give you a big gift. With that, he sent Nian Nian into the prison pagoda. After Nian Nian returned to the prison pagoda, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Bai Dizzy stared at Yi Xian. He slowly clenched his fists. As for the Sur gods behind him, they were extremely vigilant. Against Yi Xian, they naturally did not dare to be careless. At this moment, there was a sudden pft sound from behind Yi Xian's buttocks. Everyone was stunned. The next moment, everyone's expression turned extremely ugly. Bullsh *T. Yi Xian was farting. At this moment, Yi Xian took a deep breath. He looked at Bai Dizzy and smiled. This fart is my gift to you. Do you like it? Bai Dizzy looked at Yi Xian calmly. Attack! The god lords behind him dashed toward Yi Xian as soon as he finished speaking. These god lords were extremely fast. In a blink of an eye, they arrived in front of Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian's lips curled up. The next moment, hundreds of thousands of energy swords flew out of his body. These energy swords were condensed from turbid gas. When he saw the energy swords, Bai Dizzy's expression changed. Retreat. Retreat quickly. However, it was too late. The dozen god lords who were charging at the front were turned into beehives by the energy swords. Even Dao attainment realm experts did not dare to belittle the turbid gas. How could Dao manipulation realm experts withstand it? More than a dozen divine lords were caught off guard and were killed immediately. As for the remaining divine lords, they reacted quickly and retreated rapidly. This retreat took them tens of thousands of feet away. At this moment, hundreds of thousands of energy swords were circling around Yi Xian. Bai Dizzy looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. This is the turbid gas of Dark World. He is not afraid of the turbid gas. Yi Xian smiled. Are you surprised? With that, he suddenly disappeared. The next moment, hundreds of thousands of energy swords slashed at Bai Dizzy and the rest like a storm. The expressions of the divine monarchs and Dao vindication experts changed drastically when they saw this scene. If it was just the energy swords, they would not be afraid at all. Yi Xian's current strength was not enough to kill a Dao validation realm expert with energy swords. Moreover, he was controlling so many energy swords. However, this was no ordinary sword chi. It was turbid gas. Not to mention Dao validation realm experts, even Dao attainment realm experts did not dare to touch the turbid gas. Once they did, they would immediately enter the heavenly decay stage 5 and die. Bai Dizzy did not hesitate. Retreat. Everyone retreat immediately. After receiving the order, the Dao attainment realm experts and Dao validation realm experts retreated rapidly. It didn't take long for them to leave the fifth dimension. At this moment, White Robe and Jianghu stopped as well. When they looked at Yi Xian, their eyes were solemn. Turbid gas. The reason why the Daoting realm and the Dao tomb could not be fully developed was because of the turbid gas. Not to mention ordinary doubting experts, even the two of them did not dare to belittle the turbid gas. But they did not expect that Yi Xian was not afraid of the turbid gas. Moreover, he had condensed the turbid gas into swords. How did he do it? Bai Dizzy stared fixedly at Yi Xian. How is it possible that he is not afraid of the turbid gas? Yi Xian said with a smile, guess. Bai Dizzy looked at Yi Xian for a moment, and then he smiled. Yi Xian, you have really given us all a pleasant surprise. A great surprise. Yi Xian suddenly pointed with his fingers, and a strand of sword chi slashed directly at Bai Dizzy. The moment the sword chi flew out, Bai Dizzy had already appeared tens of thousands of meters away. Yi Xian was silent when he saw this. Damn it. This old fart was not good at fighting, but his escaping skills were the fastest he had seen so far. Bai Dizzy suddenly said, let's go. With that, he turned and left. White Robe and Jianghu followed him. In the starry sky, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. He knew that this matter was not over. The next time the Daoting came, it would not be the Dao attainment realm. The Dao attainment realm. Currently, the greatest threat to Yi Xian was the Dao attainment realm. In the heaven abyss, even though the Dao attainment realm old man was afraid of the turbid gas, he was not especially afraid. However, he did not dare go deep into the heaven abyss because it was filled with turbid gas. But Yi Xian was unable to fill the entire fifth dimension with turbid gas. Meanwhile, Shao Qi appeared by Yi Xian's side. What do you plan to do next? Yi Xian looked at Shao Qi. Protect the fifth dimension for me. Shao Qi nodded. All right. Yi Xian looked at the black-clothed man, and the latter hesitated for a moment before he said, I have already helped. Yi Xian tapped with his finger, and a spatial ring appeared in front of the black-clothed man. Within the spatial ring were over 10,000 fortune divine crystals. Yi Xian looked at the black-clothed man. Senior, 10,000 fortune divine crystals for each time you help. Will you do it or not? The black-clothed man was slightly hesitant. At this time, Yi Xian tapped with his finger again, and a spatial ring appeared in front of the black-clothed man. Inside were 20,000 fortune divine crystals. The black-clothed man put away the two spatial rings. I will live and die with the fifth dimension. The doubting and I are absolutely irreconcilable. Yi Xian. P.S. I am not asking for tickets, because I know that there are no more. Chapter 1400. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled when he heard the black-clothed man. The fortune divine crystals were great treasures. Even an expert like the black-clothed man couldn't refuse them. However, it made sense. The fortune divine crystals were practically controlled by the doubting and the doubtum, so it was extremely difficult for outsiders to obtain them. Yi Xian frowned when he thought up to this point. He had a few tens of millions of fortune divine crystals. He didn't just have a few tens of millions of fortune divine crystals, he even had a few super top-grade mines. A conservative estimate was that these mines produced at least 5 to 6 million fortune divine crystals every year. Since it was like that, why didn't he recruit more Dao-controlling realm experts? Even though the Dao Ting was powerful, there would definitely be brave people who would come to the fifth dimension with great rewards. So long as the price was right, then there would definitely be people who would come to the fifth dimension. Thinking up to this point, Yi Xian immediately called Guan Yin over. He thought for a moment and then said, Guan Yin, write a recruitment order for me. Just say that as long as any expert at the Dao Corroboration or Dao Defense realm comes to the fifth dimension to help, Dao Corroboration realm experts will be given 10,000 fortune divine crystals for every time they help. Dao Corroboration realm experts will be given 3,000 fortune divine crystals for every time they help. Guan Yin glanced at Yi Xian and nodded. All right. She turned around and left once she finished speaking. Yi Xian gazed at the black-clothed man. Senior, what's your name? The black-clothed man hesitated for a moment and said, Li Zua. Yi Xian nodded. Senior Li Zua, do you know any other formidable experts? Li Zua thought for a moment and said, I do know one or two. Yi Xian was delighted. Senior Li Zua, can you call them over? Li Zua fell silent. Yi Xian smiled. I won't force them. Li Zua shook his head. I'll give it a try. Yi Xian hurriedly cupped his fists. Thank you. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Li Zua gazed at Yi Xian from afar, and no one knew what he was thinking. In truth, he hadn't stayed behind for the fortune divine crystal. This thing was very important to him, but it wasn't the real reason he had stayed behind. The reason why he stayed was because he wanted to form a good relationship. Others might not know this guy's background, but he did. That azure-robed man from back then was so powerful that it made people despair. It was truly hopeless. Even at his current level, he still felt hopeless every time he thought of the green-robed man. A moment later, Li Zua turned around and left. Somewhere in the starry sky, Luo Ho and the others were silent. They were present when Dao Ting came to the fifth dimension. At this moment, Luo Ho and the others wore extremely solemn expressions. Yi Xian was not afraid of the turbid air. Moreover, he had even condensed the turbid air into a sword. This was something they had never expected. Meanwhile, Bitter King spoke abruptly. He went to the depths of the dark dimension. Luo Ho nodded. The commotion in the dark world must have something to do with him. Zhan Man's expression was cold. He must have obtained countless fortune divine crystals. Suddenly, Qing Yaoyao said, Don't worry about the fortune divine crystals. You should be wondering why he could go to the depths of the dark world and not fear the turbid gas. Zhan Man was silent. Luo Ho looked at Qing Yaoyao. What do you think? Qing Yaoyao looked down at the fifth dimension and said softly, Haven't you noticed? He can always do things that we think are impossible. Luo Ho and the others were silent. Ever since they met Yi Xian was too mysterious. Even he, Luo Ho, did not dare to enter the dark world with the turbid air. And this guy had clearly entered the depths of the dark world. Not only did he enter, but he was also not afraid of the turbid air. This guy had condensed the turbid air into a sword. This guy's body could not only absorb swords, but also the turbid air. At this moment, Qing Yaoyao suddenly said, "What do you think Dao Ting will do next?" Dao Ting. Luo Ho said softly, "They will definitely not give up. If I am not wrong, the Dao ancestor should be coming out soon." Qing Yaoyao shook her head, "Not enough. A Dao ancestor cannot destroy the current fifth dimension." Luo Ho looked at Qing Yaoyao, "Why?" Qi Yaoyao said, "Do you think Yi Xian is afraid of a Dao attainment expert?" Luo Ho and the others were silent. At this moment, Qi Yaoyao said, "Actually, we have two choices. The first is to wait and see, then reap the benefits. The second is to help Yi Xian." Bitter King looked at Qing Yaoyao, "What about the benefits?" Qing Yaoyao glanced at Bitter King, "Benefits? Why do you only care about the benefits in front of you?" With that, she turned and disappeared into the horizon. In the field, Luo Ho was silent. Help Yi Xian? It was not that he had not thought of it, but the risk was too great. The current situation was the most stable for the Dao burial mound. Inside the sword hall, Yi Xian and Nian Nian sat side by side. Grilled fish. Nian Nian stared at the golden grilled fish in front of her, her saliva almost flowing out. She spent most of her time with Yi Xian roasting fish. In fact, she did not know why she liked eating fish. She just liked it. Although Yi Xian was roasting fish, his thoughts had already drifted outside the hall. At this moment, Nian Nian suddenly said, "How can I recover my memories?" Yi Xian retracted his thoughts and looked at Nian Nian, "You want to recover your memories?" Nian Nian nodded and said softly, "Once I recover my memories, I can help you." Yi Xian was stunned, then smiled and said, "It's okay, I can still bear it." Nian Nian lowered her head slightly and did not speak. Yi Xian gently rubbed Nian Nian's little head, "Do you know? You've done enough for this world. You have let down the entire five-dimensional universe. You have already handed the heavy responsibility of protecting the five-dimensional universe to me. Then let me bear it." Nian Nian was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "Your fish is ready." Nian Nian looked at the roasted fish and sniffed it with her nose. Then, she revealed an intoxicated expression. Soon, she tore off a piece of fish and placed it in front of Yi Xian's mouth. Yi Xian laughed. He was really enjoying every moment he spent with Nian Nian. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian glanced at Jia Lu in the pagoda. When he saw Jia Lu, he was stunned. Gradually, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Jia Lu was going to succeed. If Jia Lu cultivated a Dao body, then she would definitely be able to block a Dao attainment realm expert. And Dao Ting had two Dao attainment realm experts. Thinking of this, the smile on Yi Xian's face gradually disappeared. For now, the five-dimensional universe still did not have a good chance of winning. It was not enough. He had to reach the Dao attainment realm. Thinking of this, Yi Xian got up and left with Nian Nian. The best way to improve was to fight. Dao Ting. At this time, the atmosphere in Dao Ting was extremely solemn. This time, almost all of Dao Ting's forces had attacked. However, not only did they not gain an advantage, but Yi Xian had also killed more than a dozen Dao attainment realm experts. Turbid Qi. Yi Xian could actually control turbid Qi. It had to be said that this made many of Dao Ting's experts extremely afraid. In a large hall, basically all of Dao Ting's experts were gathered here. Everyone in the hall was at the Dao attainment realm. Leading them were Bai Dizzy, Jianghu, and White Robe. At this moment, an old man suddenly said softly, "How can he absorb the turbid Qi? Where's the turbid Qi? Absorb turbid Qi." In the hall, everyone looked at Bai Dizzy. In fact, there was still some resentment in everyone's hearts. Bai Dizzy's intelligence skills were not good enough. Bai Dizzy was silent. He did not know that Yi Xian could absorb turbid Qi. Why was this guy not afraid of turbid Qi? Bai Dizzy was puzzled no matter how he thought about it. Jianghu suddenly said, "Bai Dizzy, aren't you going to say something?" Bai Dizzy said softly, "Every time I think I understand him, he gives me a new surprise. As he spoke, he shook his head with a bitter feeling in his heart. He had never underestimated Yi Xian, but Yi Xian would always surprise him. Just like this time, he'd thought that the people behind Yi Xian would show up, but they didn't. Yi Xian had used the turbid qi to drive them away. Even Dao Attainment Realm experts didn't dare to underestimate turbid qi. How could Yi Xian not be afraid of turbid qi? Meanwhile, the white-robed man spoke abruptly, "Don't forget two things. The first is that Mu Ninian. Even though she's temporarily lost her memories and strength, destroying our Dao court would be as easy as flicking her finger once she recovers her memories." Everyone was silent. Once Mu Ninian regained her memories, Dao Ting would be finished immediately. Because the five-dimensional universe no longer needed Mu Ninian to suppress it. Once Mu Ninian regained her memories, it would mean that her strength would reach its peak, the true peak. At that time, Dao Ting would be like a chicken in front of her. At this moment, White Robe spoke again. "The second thing is Yi Xian. Once he reaches Dao Attainment Realm, the price we have to pay to kill him will be more than 10 times higher than it is now." Everyone was silent. Once Yi Xian reached Dao Attainment Realm, it could be said that even if White Robe and Jianghu joined forces, they might not be able to do anything to him. At this moment, Bai Dizzy suddenly said, "Wait." Everyone looked at Bai Dizzy, and Bai Dizzy said solemnly, "At most 5 days, the Tao ancestor will come out of seclusion." Tao ancestor. Hearing this, everyone's expression instantly relaxed. That was the true backbone of Dao Ting. Meanwhile, a sword howl suddenly resounded from outside the hall. In the next moment, everyone raised their heads and looked over. A young man was walking slowly towards the southern gate with a sword in his hand. Yi Xian. The expressions of all the experts within the hall instantly changed when they saw Yi Xian. What's this fellow doing here? In the next moment, all the experts within the hall had appeared at the southern gate. In an instant, all of them surrounded Yi Xian. Yi Xian glanced at the doubting experts that had suddenly appeared around him, and he smiled. "So many of you?" Bai Dizzy gazed at Yi Xian and said, "What? You intend to fight all of us by yourself?" Yi Xian opened his palm. In the next moment, countless energy swords condensed from death energy appeared around him. All the experts of Dao Ting retreated explosively when they witnessed this scene. The expressions of Bai Dizzy and the others instantly became solemn. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Don't run. I've come here this time to ask for a favor from all of you." Bai Dizzy frowned slightly and said, "Ask for our help? Are you sure?" Yi Xian nodded. "I've been at the Dao control realm for too long, and I want to break through. I want all of you to help me." Bai Dizzy gazed at Yi Xian and said, "Have you gone mad?" Yi Xian gazed at Jianghu and said, "Jianghu, I've never fought you in the past. Now, let's fight again." Jianghu gazed at Yi Xian and said, "You want to fight me, and then charge into the Dao control realm?" Yi Xian nodded and said, "I won't utilize foul energy." Jianghu stared fixedly at Yi Xian and said, "Do you think I'll agree?" Yi Xian pointed at the white-robed figures and said, "Both of you attack me together." Attack him together. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned. Chapter 1401. Together. No one expected Yi Xian to challenge Jianghu and White Robe. 1 against 2. Was Yi Xian crazy? Although Yi Xian was a genius, Jianghu and the white-robed man could be said to be the strongest people in the Dao court who had achieved the Dao. And now he wanted to fight 1 against 2. Jianghu looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. Beside him, White Robe kept silent with his eyes closed. Yi Xian smiled. "Why, are you refusing?" Jianghu looked at Yi Xian in silence. At this moment, Bai Dizzy's voice suddenly sounded in Jianghu's mind. "This person must have something to rely on." Jianghu said in a low voice, "But this is also our chance. A chance to kill him. Isn't that right?" Bai Dizzy was silent. If Jianghu and White Robe joined forces, they would have a chance to kill Yi Xian. But if they couldn't kill him, it was very likely that Yi Xian would reach Dao defense. At this moment, White Robe suddenly opened his eyes. Why think so much? Let's just fight. As his voice fell, he suddenly rushed forward. The next moment, a silver light appeared half an inch between Yi Xian's eyebrows. The reason why it didn't pierce through was because a sword had pierced the body of that spear. Seeing that his attack had missed, White Robe suddenly swept his spear horizontally. Swoosh! With a sweep, space was torn apart. Yi Xian blocked it with his sword. Boom! Under the spear, Yi Xian instantly retreated hundreds of feet away. But just as he stopped, a silver spear pierced through the air. Yi Xian straightened his sword and slashed forward. Boom! A wave of sword light exploded in the field. Yi Xian retreated hundreds of feet again. Before he stopped, a shadow suddenly appeared in front of him. Then, a silver spear instantly reached his throat. As fast as lightning. Yi Xian's expression was calm. Just as the spear was about to pierce his throat, his body suddenly leaned back, and at the same time, the sword in his hands suddenly flew out. Chi! The sword brought with it a sword light that looked like a crescent moon. White Robe suddenly withdrew his spear and slammed it down. Boom! Yi Xian's sword was directly hit, and the powerful force sent the sword flying. Yi Xian himself took the opportunity to retreat 1,000 feet away. The moment he stopped, he stretched out his right hand, and the sword that was sent flying by the White Robe landed firmly in his palm. In the distance, the white-robed man stood with a spear in his hand. He was dressed in white robes and had a silver spear in his hand. He looked like a god of war. Jianghu did not intervene. Whether it was him or White Robe, both of them had their own pride. As long as Yi Xian didn't play any dirty tricks, they wouldn't choose to gang up on Yi Xian. Arrogance. They had fought countless battles in their lives, so why would they fear Yi Xian? At this moment, White Robe suddenly took a step forward. With each step, he struck with his spear. The space in front of Yi Xian suddenly cracked open. Following that, a silver light flashed out. The spear arrived before the man. Yi Xian did not block it. Instead, he stabbed with his sword. This time, he chose to fight head-on. Boom! The sword light shattered, and Yi Xian retreated more than 10 feet. However, White Robe also retreated more than 300 feet with his spear. Yi Xian actually gained the upper hand in this head-on confrontation. Not far away, Bai Dizzy frowned slightly. How is this possible? At this moment, Jianghu suddenly said, his strength is different from before. Strength. Yi Xian's current strength was naturally different from before. He had absorbed the blood of the entire Naga Dragon clan. He now possessed the strength of the Naga Dragon clan. In terms of pure strength, perhaps only Jia Lu could compete with him. At this moment, Bai Dizzy's voice suddenly sounded in Jianghu's mind. When he fights with White Robe later, if you ambush him, how confident are you of killing him? Hearing this, Jianghu frowned slightly. He looked at Bai Dizzy. What do you mean? Bai Dizzy's face was extremely gloomy. Jianghu, I know you have your pride, but you have to know that this Yi Xian. Jianghu suddenly shook his head. Bai Dizzy, I know that in your heart, you have always wanted Yi Xian to die. I also want him to die. However, I will not ambush him. Now, it is a fair battle between him and White Robe. Bai Dizzy stared at Jianghu. Jianghu, don't be pedantic. I beg you. Jianghu looked at Yi Xian in the distance and said softly, it's not pedantic. It's the bottom line. Bai Dizzy still wanted to say something. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly rushed towards White Robe with his sword in hand. Bai Dizzy's face was extremely ugly. If Jianghu suddenly ambushed him, he had a high chance of killing Yi Xian. However, Jianghu was too pedantic. Bottom line? Bai Dizzy also wanted to have a bottom line. However, between the bottom line and doubting's life and death, he chose the latter. As if he had thought of something, he suddenly looked at a Sir God on his right. At this moment, Jianghu's voice suddenly rang in his head. Bai Dizzy, doubting, am I a sore loser? Bai Dizzy looked at Jianghu. Jianghu said softly, even if we lose, let us lose with some dignity, okay? Bai Dizzy was silent. Jianghu said again, let them fight. If White Robe loses, I won't say anything if you choose to gang up on him. But now, let them fight fairly. I believe that White Robe will choose the same. Bai Dizzy was still silent. Jianghu looked at Bai Dizzy. Doubting is my belief. I will fight for this belief until the end. I know that doubting is your belief too. However, we cannot throw away our bottom line for our belief. Bai Dizzy sighed softly. Jianghu did not say anything else. He looked into the distance. At this moment, Yi Xian and White Robe's battle was very intense. Actually, he was feeling rather emotional. Back when Yi Xian had just gone to Celestial Abyss, Yi Xian was not his match. But now, Yi Xian's strength was no weaker than his and White Robe's. Yi Xian's growth was really too fast. Boom! At this moment, an explosion suddenly sounded. Under everyone's gaze, White Robe was forced back nearly 100 feet by Yi Xian's sword. White Robe had just stopped when he suddenly soared into the sky. The next moment, he held the silver spear in his hand and threw it at Yi Xian. The spear was like a raging dragon emerging from the sea, piercing through heaven and earth. Below, Yi Xian's expression was calm. Before the spear reached him, the space around him was already distorted. The momentum of the spear was too strong. When the spear arrived above Yi Xian suddenly transformed into a ray of light that shot into the sky. Bang! A world-shaking explosion suddenly resounded, and then the space in an area of over 100 kilometers cracked apart. In midair, Yi Xian held his sword firmly against the spear. The energy within the spear hadn't vanished completely. The glow on Yi Xian's sword was growing dimmer and dimmer. Right at this moment, White Robe suddenly appeared in the sky above the spear, and then he stomped his right foot against the tip of the spear. Bang! Yi Xian descended straight down from midair while the tip of the spear was constantly pressing against the tip of Yi Xian's sword. So, White Robe's energy was ceaselessly suppressing Yi Xian. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stomped his right foot against the ground. In the next moment, the sword domain suddenly appeared here. At the same time, he swiftly slashed his sword forward. Bang! Yi Xian stopped. In the next moment, White Robe retreated explosively by 300 m. After White Robe stopped, he gazed at Yi Xian with eyes that were filled with battle intent. Fight! Yi Xian's eyes were filled with battle intent as well. Since he'd absorbed the dragon's blood and cultivated his body into the Dao body, he'd rarely fought. But now, he wanted to fight to his heart's content. Yi Xian walked towards White Robe with his sword in hand. His blood started to surge within him. However, he didn't release the energy of his bloodline. Not only did he not release the energy of his bloodline, he didn't even expose his Dao body. White Robe gazed at Yi Xian from afar while he held the silver spear tightly in his right hand. The silver spear in his hand started to tremble violently, and a monstrous aura enveloped the surroundings. The aura of the spear was overwhelming. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. White Robe's face was expressionless as he suddenly stabbed the spear in his right hand forward. Bang! A ray of sword light was forced to stop by this spear strike. The space around White Robe and Yi Xian transformed into nothingness at this moment, whereas, White Robe and Yi Xian separated from each other at this moment, and both of them retreated explosively by over 1 kilometer. As Yi Xian was flying backwards, a flying sword suddenly slashed towards White Robe. White Robe stabbed forward in midair. Bang! The flying sword was blocked. However, in the next moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of the flying sword. He grabbed the sword and slashed forward with great force. When this strike descended, the expressions of everyone here changed drastically. Including White Robe. Dao Sword. This strike wasn't an ordinary sword technique any longer, but a Dao sword. It was also the first time Yi Xian had executed a Dao sword since he'd cultivated the Dao sword. This strike shook the heavens and the earth. White Robe's eyes revealed a solemn expression for the first time as he stood before Yi Xian. He held the spear with both hands and swiftly swept it horizontally, causing a strand of domineering spear energy to sweep out. But in the next moment, this spear energy was directly slashed into pieces by Yi Xian's strike. Bang! Under the gazes of everyone, White Robe instantly retreated explosively by 3 kilometers, whereas, the space in an area of 3 kilometers in front of Yi Xian had been transformed into nothingness. This strike had forcefully obliterated this expanse of space. Nearby, a wisp of blood slowly seeped out from the corner of White Robe's mouth. Moreover, countless cracks had appeared on the silver spear in his hand. The surroundings suddenly fell silent. White Robe was at a complete disadvantage in this collision. In the distance, Yi Xian walked slowly towards White Robe with his sword in hand. Meanwhile, a trace of viciousness flashed through White Robe's eyes, and then he suddenly leaped up. At this moment, his entire body became illusory, and the silver spear in his hands suddenly trembled violently. At a disadvantage, Yi Xian suddenly leaped up and slashed with his sword. Dao sword. With this slash, the space around Yi Xian instantly became illusory. Meanwhile, White Robe suddenly stabbed down with his spear. It was a tit for tat. Both of them had executed their strongest attacks. Bang! As soon as the spear and sword came into contact, the space in an area of over 100 kilometers around the southern gate was forcefully obliterated. On the other hand, Yi Xian and White Robe retreated explosively, and they retreated for over 10 kilometers. As soon as Yi Xian stopped, the space in an area of 3 kilometers behind him was instantly transformed into nothingness. Yi Xian was first stunned, and then he hurriedly fell to the ground. He held his chest with both hands as if he was about to die. Actually, he was completely fine because his body had forcefully withstood all the force of White Robe's attack. However, he didn't want to expose his Dao physique. In the distance, White Robe was quite heavily injured as well. However, he didn't fall, and he stood there with his spear in hand. Meanwhile, White Robe suddenly charged towards Yi Xian with his spear in hand. Obviously, he wanted to put an end to Yi Xian right away. Now that Yi Xian was heavily injured, it was the best time to kill him. Under everyone's gazes, Yi Xian clutched his chest as blood flowed incessantly from his mouth, and he seemed to be on the verge of death. White Robe was getting closer and closer to Yi Xian. Chapter 1402. Just as White Robe was several feet away from Yi Xian, White Robe suddenly stopped. White Robe stared at Yi Xian. "Stop pretending." Yi Xian did not react and still looked like he was about to die. White Robe just stared at Yi Xian. He did not choose to attack again. After a moment, seeing that White Robe did not attack, Yi Xian sat up. He looked at White Robe and thought it was a pity. This guy actually did not fall for it. White Robe looked at Yi Xian. "If you were really that weak, you would not have come to challenge me." Saying that, he slowly closed his eyes. "Yi Xian, if you want to kill me, there is only one way, and that is to kill me openly." "You want to kill me? Then you might be thinking too much." Yi Xian chuckled. "Then I will kill you openly." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly leaped up with his sword in hand, and then he swiftly slashed down. Dao sword. At the same time that the sword slashed down, a mysterious force suddenly enveloped White Robe. Sword domain. White Robe was expressionless as he stabbed out with his spear. Boom! Heaven and earth trembled. Under everyone's gaze, White Robe retreated rapidly. Not far away, Bai Dizzy and the others did not look good. Because Yi Xian could already suppress White Robe. He did not rely on battle techniques, but purely on strength and that Dao sword. If it were anyone else, they would definitely not be able to continuously use such a powerful sword technique, but Yi Xian could. Because his fleshly body was really strong enough. The battle became more and more intense, and the blood in Yi Xian's body gradually boiled. However, he was still suppressing his bloodline power. This bloodline power was too abnormal. Unless it was a desperate situation, he would usually not use it. In the distance, Bai Dizzy suddenly looked at Jianghu. He is getting stronger as he fights. Jianghu was silent. He also realized this problem. Yi Xian was getting stronger as he fought. In other words, Yi Xian had just broken through. Right now, Yi Xian was using battle to stimulate his potential. Bai Dizzy said softly, if this continues, I don't know if White Robe will lose, but I do know that this Yi Xian will become stronger and stronger. He might even reach the Dao manipulation realm. Obviously, he still wanted Jianghu to sneak up on Yi Xian. Now that Yi Xian was being forced by the white-robed man, as long as Jianghu chose to launch a sneak attack, there was a great chance that he could kill Yi Xian. In the field, only Jianghu had a good chance to kill Yi Xian. Jianghu fell silent. Bai Dizzy sighed softly. Jianghu, I know you're proud, but have you ever thought that once this person reaches the Imperial Dao, even a Dao ancestor wouldn't be able to kill him so easily? You have to know that he has yet to unleash his full strength. Putting everything else aside, he has yet to use the power of his bloodline. What does this mean? It means that once he uses the power of his bloodline, White Robe will most likely lose. Jianghu slowly closed his eyes. And the sword in his hand kept trembling. Bai Dizzy continued, Jianghu, if we don't get rid of Yi Xian today, Dao Ting, will be destroyed by this person in the future. Yi Xian is a despicable person. There's no need for us to talk about fairness with him. Moreover, he is challenging you and White Robe. There's nothing wrong with you making a move. After a long silence, Jianghu looked at Yi Xian in the distance and said softly, if I make a move, it means that I, Dao Ting, will lose the last bit of pride and dignity. Bai Dizzy was about to speak when Jianghu suddenly said, Bai Dizzy, do you know why the great Dao collapsed all those years ago? Bai Dizzy looked at Jianghu. Jianghu said softly, because we are unscrupulous. Our Dao court is unscrupulous in everything we do. It is because of Ru Chu that the world has appeared. Qingcheng, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as crown prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this time, a timid voice suddenly rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a hint of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is a crown prince. Why did you discard him for no reason? The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. This is a matter of the clan. Why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid, not daring to look at the Great Elder, but she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and entered the ancestral hall. She bowed again to the elders on both sides. Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan, and we don't know if he's dead or alive. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to discard his position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. Discard him or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this moment, the new crown prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder said coldly, then flog 30 times. Soon, 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, even now he is fighting for the clan, but the clan is so unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new crown Prince Yi Lang, and he knew that this was his chance to show off. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the position of crown prince, it's everyone's wish, why are you shouting?" As he said this, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen, but she did not cry, and just covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard, and smiled, "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed, "I'm Jianghu, greeting the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded, "You're not bad. After I become the crown prince, I need 10 guards, so you can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Jianghu was overjoyed, and hurriedly bowed deeply, "I'm willing to go through fire and water for the crown prince, even if I have to die 10,000 times. Yi Lang nodded slightly, "Drag him out, this person is disturbing the ancestral hall, don't show mercy, understand?" Jianghu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. Immediately, he grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Jianghu seemed to have seen something, and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the South Mountain. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, and his expression was frighteningly gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Jianghu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Jianghu saw Yi Xian, his face changed, and he quickly looked at Yi Lang. Just as he was about to speak, Yi Xian suddenly leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Jianghu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He charged towards Jianghu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Jianghu's chest. Pooh! Jianghu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian lifted his head and looked at him, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stepped on Jianghu's face. Jianghu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Jianghu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed out, "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Jianghu, and kicked Jianghu's head. Pung! Qingcheng, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned, "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, "Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you discard him for no reason?" The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan. Why are you interrupting? Leave." Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the Great Elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. Impudent." The Great Elder suddenly raged, "Discard him or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. "You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The Great Elder replied coldly, "Then flog her 30 times. Soon, 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now, he is risking his life for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince, Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince. What are you yelling about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry. She only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled, "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed, "Subordinate Jianghu greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded, "You're not bad. After I become the prince, I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Jianghu was overjoyed. He hurriedly bowed deeply. "This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the prince." Yi Lang nodded, "Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't hold back." "Understood." Jianghu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Jianghu seemed to see something and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe. The robe was tattered and covered in blood. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a sinister smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes, his face dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Jianghu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Jianghu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger leaping in front of him. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Jianghu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He charged towards Jianghu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Jianghu's chest. Pooh! Jianghu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and snarled, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stepped on Jianghu's face. Jianghu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, "Prince, save me." Yi Xian did not care about Jianghu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being cut by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Jianghu and kicked Jianghu's head. Pung! Chapter 1403. Behind Bai Dizzy stood a middle-aged man. It was the doubting Dao ancestor. Bai Dizzy said, "Dao ancestor, Jianghu." The Dao ancestor said, "This is his choice. Respect it." Bai Dizzy sighed. With Jianghu's departure, the doubting strength was greatly reduced. The Dao ancestor looked into the depths of the starry sky. "Did you find the plain-dressed woman?" Bai Dizzy said, "Divine Wind and the others have been found. But both of them are dead. It seems that the plain-dressed woman is stronger than we imagined." The Dao ancestor was silent. Bai Dizzy said, "Our top priority now is to deal with Mu Nianyan. She has lost her memory and has no strength. Now is the best time to kill her." Mu Nianyan. The Dao ancestor turned to look in the direction of the five-dimensional universe and said, "We should have destroyed her body and the five-dimensional universe." As for that woman, he was also afraid of her. It was that woman who had destroyed his body with less than 30% of her strength. 30% of her strength. He had to admit that he was a little shocked at that time. He was at the Dao attainment realm. Moreover, he was at the peak of the Dao attainment realm. However, that woman had easily destroyed his body with only 30% of her strength. In fact, during this period of seclusion, he had been thinking about how strong that woman was. There was no answer. There was no path above the Dao attainment realm. At least for him, there was no path. After a long time, the Dao ancestor suddenly said, "Get ready. I will go find that person." With that, he turned and left. In the field, Bai Dizzy was silent for a long time, then said softly, "Jianghu, the doubting realm will become better. The order of the Great Path will also be restored." With that, he turned and left. The Dao ancestor came to the Dao tomb. On a mountain peak, the Dao ancestor came to a cave. The Dao ancestor looked at the cave and said, "Senior brother, are you still in seclusion?" The stone door of the cave suddenly opened and a middle-aged man walked out. "Lord." The Lord of the Dao tomb. If there were outsiders here, they would definitely be shocked. Because the Dao ancestor called him senior brother. In fact, very few people knew that the Lord was once a doubting. However, he later parted ways with the doubting. The Lord looked at the Dao ancestor and smiled, "Junior brother, how have you been?" The Dao ancestor was expressionless. "Looks like you didn't break through again." The Lord laughed, "It doesn't matter." The Dao ancestor smiled and said, "Do you really not care?" The Lord raised his head and looked deep into the starry sky. He smiled and said, "Junior brother, during my seclusion, I suddenly realized something. It's meaningless." The Dao ancestor frowned slightly. "What's meaningless?" The Lord laughed, "Doubting battles with you are meaningless." The Dao ancestor looked at the Great Lord. "What do you mean?" The Lord laughed. "How strong do you think Mu Nianyan is?" The Dao ancestor was silent. Mu Nianyan. Just how strong was this woman? He didn't know. That woman's strength could be said to have exceeded his understanding. The Lord continued, "Even if I subvert your doubting, what's the point? The 3,000 great Daos are just ants to some people in this world." Then, he looked at the Dao ancestor and smiled, "I want to go to other places to see how big the universe is. I also want to see the strong from other places. What about you?" The Dao ancestor was silent. The Lord laughed, "I know that you want to kill Yi Xian and that woman. Moreover, you want the Dao scriptures. Yi Xian now has 5 scrolls, your Dao court has 2, and the Dao tomb has 1. If you get all of them, you will have 8 Dao scriptures. However, the last one is in the Saha world. Can you get it?" The Dao ancestor whispered, "What if you get it?" The Lord was silent. Dao scriptures. What did it mean to gather the Dao scriptures? It meant to awaken the Dao spirit, one had to say. It was very tempting. The Tao ancestor looked at the Lord. Senior brother, aren't you tempted? The Lord laughed and didn't say anything. The Tao ancestor said, Senior brother, if we gather the Tao scriptures and awaken the Tao spirit, we will be able to reach the next level. The Lord was silent. The Tao ancestor said, don't you want to see the complete version of the Tao scriptures? The Lord looked at the Tao ancestor. That Yi Xian is not simple. The Tao ancestor smiled. His biggest support is that Mu Nianyan. That person has lost her memory. If we want to kill her, it will be easy, isn't it? The Lord asked, what about the person behind him? The Tao ancestor was silent. Because until now, the Tao Ting still didn't know who was behind Yi Xian. The Lord smiled and said, let's not talk about the others. Let's talk about the woman in the plain dress. Junior brother, what level do you think she is? The Tao ancestor said, Senior brother, you have actually made a decision, right? The Lord smiled, what decision? The Tao ancestor looked at the Lord, you will not give up on the Tao scriptures. The Lord laughed, Junior brother, you have no choice because you have already become enemies with Yi Xian. However, I have a choice because I have a good relationship with Yi Xian in the Tao tomb. What do you think? The Tao ancestor smiled, Senior brother, you said that you want to leave. Where are you going? To the ancient god abyss? The Lord said, can't I? The Tao ancestor looked at the Lord, are you going there to rely on others? The Lord's smile slowly disappeared. The Tao ancestor smiled and said, Senior brother, at this level, you and I can be said to have reached our limits. Although we are all geniuses, the Tao attainment realm is our limit. Not to mention us, wasn't Master the same back then? To us, there is only one way to change our fate and reach the next level. That is to gather all the Tao scriptures and awaken the Tao spirit. What do you think? The Lord smiled, you want me to join forces with you? The Tao ancestor looked at the Lord, yes. The Lord chuckled, Junior brother, do you know that greed can kill people? The Tao ancestor was expressionless, if we can't reach the next level, how long do you and I have to live? 10,000 years? 1,000 years? The Lord was silent. The Tao ancestor continued, one more thing. Senior brother, don't you want to know why Mu Nianyan is so strong? He doesn't have the complete Tao scripture but his wealth is above the Tao realm. I believe that you must be curious too, right? The Lord smiled, I am indeed curious. The Tao ancestor said, it's easy to figure it out. Just capture this person, right? The Lord did not speak. He slowly walked to the side of the cliff. No one knew what he was thinking. The Tao ancestor continued, Senior brother, you are worried about the person behind him. The Lord smiled, shouldn't I be worried? The Tao ancestor said, everything has its risks. The Lord said softly, this is a little risky. The Tao ancestor was about to speak when the Lord said, as far as I know, Yi Xian has an agreement with the Tao tomb. After he obtains the Tao scripture, he will share it with the Tao tomb. The Tao ancestor's face darkened, Senior brother, do you really believe it? The Lord looked at the Tao ancestor, why wouldn't I believe it? After Yi Xian obtained the Tao scripture, he was very generous. He shared the 5 Tao scriptures with the people around him. The Tao ancestor said, it's just to buy people's hearts. The Lord laughed, buy people's hearts? Junior brother. You are still the same as before. You like to look at people with prejudice. Sometimes, is it so difficult to admit the excellence of others? The Tao ancestor was expressionless. The Lord said, Junior brother, I am different from you. You have no way out because if you don't kill Yi Xian will destroy your doubting. As for me, I have no reason to be enemies with him. Why should I be enemies with him? My Tao tomb has already formed a good relationship with him. Why should I turn this good relationship into a bad one? Of course, I am also tempted by what you said. Gather all the Tao scriptures, awaken the spirit of the Tao, and reach a higher level. However, even if I am tempted, there is no need for me to be enemies with Yi Xian. Why? Because after Yi Xian gathers all the Tao scriptures, I don't think there will be any problem with him sharing it. As he said this, he looked at the Tao ancestor and smiled. It might be difficult for you to share it. However, I don't think there will be any difficulty for Yi Xian to share it. This person has a pure heart and values relationships. Most importantly, he doesn't care about the Tao scriptures. When he gathers all 8 scrolls, I will give him the one from my Tao tomb. I believe that it won't be difficult for him to share the complete version of the Tao scripture. What do you think? The Tao ancestor smiled. It seems that senior brother thinks that I, Tao Ting, will definitely lose this battle. The Lord shook his head. That is not what I am concerned about. What I am concerned about is what choice I should make to maximize my benefits. As he said this, he looked at the sky and smiled. I will not help Yi Xian fight you. Although he is worth befriending, I do not want to be involved in this whirlpool. After all, he is a person with the cause of disaster. It is better to stay away from him. Also, I will not help you fight him. You are an ingrate. It is better to help him than to help you. After all, Yi Xian is a person who values relationships more than you. As he said this, he looked at the Tao ancestor and smiled. I will wait and see. The Tao ancestor smiled. What if I win? The Lord blinked. If you win, will you be able to gather all the Tao scriptures? Junior brother, don't forget that I also have the Tao scriptures. You win. If you want to gather all the Tao scriptures, you have to beg me. The Tao ancestor looked at the Lord and did not speak. The Lord smiled. For the sake of my dead master, I will give you a piece of advice. It is not scary to make mistakes, but it is scary to make mistakes again and again. Mu Niannian has been resurrected. Yi Xian's hatred for the Tao Ting is not that great. Admit defeat and form a good relationship with the 5th dimension. I believe that it should not be a big problem. After all, Mu Niannian is alive. For Yi Xian, as long as Mu Niannian is not dead, anything can be discussed. As for the Tao scriptures, if it is yours, then it is yours. If it is not, then don't force it. The Tao ancestor looked at the Lord and smiled. Senior brother, do you know why you lost to me? Without waiting for the Lord to answer, the Tao ancestor said, because I fight. I fight for everything. Since I have set foot on this path, I must fight. Watch carefully. This time, I will fight with Yi Xian. As he said this, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon. On the mountain peak, the Lord was silent for a moment. Then, he shook his head and smiled. Fight your sister. Chapter 1404. The 5-Dimensional Universe. Yi Xian returned to the 5-dimensional universe. At this moment, his heart was extremely heavy. Lord True Marshal had reached the Tao attainment realm. This was one disaster after another for the 5-dimensional universe. He was also extremely depressed. How did that guy reach the Tao attainment realm? Could it be that his battle with White Robe inspired that guy? Thinking of this, Yi Xian could not help but shake his head and sigh. This trip to the Tao Ting realm was a huge loss. Inside the hall, Yi Xian had just entered the sword hall when he saw Guan Yin. Beside Guan Yin was a man in black. It was Li Zua. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw Li Zua, then hurriedly said, Senior Li Zua, you're back so soon? Li Zua said solemnly, I called 2 people, both at the peak of the Tao attainment realm. However, they will need 30,000 fortune divine crystals for each attack. Is there a problem? Yi Xian smiled. No problem. What he lacked the least now were fortune divine crystals. Li Zua nodded slightly. That's good. They are all in the dark. If you need them, they can attack at any time. Of course, if the 5-dimensional universe has no chance of winning, they will not fight to the death. They will choose to leave. Yi Xian nodded. Understood. After all, they were here to make money, not to fight to the death. Of course, he only needed them to help him hold back a few of the Tao Ting realm's core powerhouses. Li Zua nodded and did not say anything else. he quietly left. Yi Xian looked at Guan Yin. Guan Yin smiled. Arrow, Zhou, and Lanxiu, and Wenxiu have all come out. Yi Xian was about to speak when a woman walked in. It was Zhang Wenxiu. Seeing Zhang Wenxiu, Guan Yin smiled and retreated. She knew that Yi Xian and Zhang Wenxiu had a special relationship. Yi Xian looked at Zhang Wenxiu and smiled. Congratulations. Zhang Wenxiu had reached the Dao validation realm. Zhang Wenxiu walked over to Yi Xian and sized up Yi Xian. Let's spar. Yi Xian laughed and said, You really want to beat me? Zhang Wenxiu rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. She walked to the side and sat down. Looks like I won't be able to defeat you. Yi Xian sat beside Zhang Wenxiu. Wenxiu, how's the academy? Zhang Wenxiu smiled and said, It's getting better and better. The current academy is several times bigger than before. The headmaster of the academy only teaches every day. She is very relaxed. Yi Xian turned to look at Zhang Wenxiu. What about you? What are your plans for the future? Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian and did not say anything. Yi Xian blinked. Did I say something wrong? Zhang Wenxiu did not say anything. She stood up and left. Yi Xian quickly grabbed Zhang Wenxiu's hand. Zhang Wenxiu tried to break free, but Yi Xian's physical strength was too strong. She could not break free at all. Yi Xian asked softly, What's wrong? Zhang Wenxiu was expressionless and did not say anything. Yi Xian caressed Zhang Wenxiu's hand and said softly, I know that I have neglected you these days. I, Yi Xian, am not a heartless person. But you also know that too many things have happened in the fifth dimension. Zhang Wenxiu did not say anything. She knew that ever since Mu Nianyan left, Yi Xian had shouldered too much. Now, the safety of the entire fifth dimension was on Yi Xian's shoulders. Yi Xian said again, If I am not wrong, Doubting might be risking his life. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian. What are your plans? Yi Xian smiled. What plans can I have? Of course, I will fight them to the death. Zhang Wenxiu was silent. Yi Xian held Zhang Wenxiu's hand and said softly, I can't promise you anything because I might die tomorrow. Zhang Wenxiu shook her head. I don't need you to promise me anything. Yi Xian smiled. If we live together. If we die together. What I owe you in this life, I will repay you in my next life. Zhang Wenxiu said calmly, If you lose, will Doubting let you have a next life? Yi Xian laughed. That's true. They will definitely annihilate my soul. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian with a complicated look in her eyes. You have matured a lot. She still remembered the Yi Xian of the past. At that time, Yi Xian was sloppy and not serious at all. But now, Yi Xian was the master of the fifth dimension. As if she thought of something, Zhang Wenxiu suddenly grabbed Yi Xian's hand. Do you know? I have been a little worried these days. I am not worried about Doubting, but worried about you. I am worried that you are walking too fast. Yi Xian blinked. I am walking too fast? Zhang Wenxiu nodded. You are walking too fast. So fast that I can't keep up with you. Yi Xian fell silent. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian. It is not just me. They all have this worry. Yi Xian smiled. I have to walk fast. Zhang Wenxiu nodded. I understand. Yi Xian took out a storage ring and placed it in Zhang Wenxiu's hand. There are 1,000,000 fortune divine crystals and some treasures that you can use. Zhang Wenxiu did not refuse. She put away the storage ring and said, If there is anything, we will all bear it together. Don't bear it alone, understand? Yi Xian nodded. Okay. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian. Even if we die, we will die together. Of course, it is best if we can live. After all, you still owe me so much. Yi Xian held Zhang Wenxiu's hand tightly and smiled. I will repay what I owe you in this lifetime. Zhang Wenxiu suddenly threw herself into Yi Xian's arms. She closed her eyes and shook her head. Men smell so bad. Then, she turned and left. Inside the hall, Yi Xian was silent. At this time, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in the hall. The person who had come was the High Lord. Yi Xian looked at the Lord. Senior, are you the Lord of the Dao Tomb? The Lord smiled. How did you guess? Yi Xian said, there is only one Dao ancestor that can make me feel threatened. The other one is the Lord. The Lord laughed. Yi Xian, there is more than one Dao ancestor in the Daoting realm. Yi Xian smiled. I was just guessing, but it seems like I was right. Looking at Yi Xian, the Lord said, I am here to talk about cooperation with you. Yi Xian said, Senior, please speak. The Lord laughed and said, you are a straightforward person, so I won't beat around the bush. What I mean is simple. This time, the Dao Tomb will not interfere in the matter between you and the Daoting. Yi Xian said, Senior, please continue. The Lord continued. If you can gather all 8 Dao scriptures, I will give you the one in the Dao Tomb. You can summon the Dao spirit. But in return, I want to see the complete Dao scripture. Is there a problem? Yi Xian smiled. Senior, I have discussed this with Senior Rahu. We have reached an agreement. The Lord looked at Yi Xian. I just want to confirm. Yi Xian said, Senior, don't worry. If I can gather all 9 Dao scriptures, I will let you have a look. The Lord smiled. Thank you. He turned to leave. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Sir, can we talk about something else? The Lord turned to Yi Xian. You are trying to trick me. Yi Xian was speechless. The Lord smiled. Although I know you are trying to trick me, I am willing to listen to you. Consider it as giving you face. After all, I still have to give you face. Yi Xian looked at the Lord. Senior, I want to borrow a few people from you. The Lord blinked. I said. The Dao Tomb will not interfere. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, Sister Nian has reached the Dao realm. The Lord's smile froze. Yi Xian said, Sister Nian and I are very close. He looked at the Lord. Senior, do you want to make a bet? The Lord was silent. He knew what Yi Xian meant. If Yi Xian won and Mu Niannian regained his memory, he could ask Mu Niannian for guidance. If he could ask Mu Niannian for guidance, the complete Dao scripture would be nothing. Why would Mu Niannian teach him? It was simple. Yi Xian. If Yi Xian spoke up for him, it would be simple. Who didn't know the relationship between Yi Xian and Mu Niannian? A moment later, the Lord suddenly said, I will give you 6 Dao Defense Peak Stage powerhouses. I have secretly trained these 6 people. Even Luo Ho doesn't know of their existence. Their strength is second only to Luo Ho and the Heavenly King. Then, 6 black-robed people appeared behind him. All 6 of them were Dao Defense Peak Stage powerhouses. The Lord looked at Yi Xian. Now, the 6 of them will listen to your orders. Yi Xian said, Thank you. The Lord suddenly laughed, Can you tell me the truth? Yi Xian said with a smile, What do you mean? The Lord smiled. For example, your true background. And the people behind you. Yi Xian shook his head. Senior, you won't believe me even if I tell you. The Lord smiled. How can I believe you if you don't tell me? Yi Xian thought for a moment. Actually, I am the son of the plane of the 9-dimensional universe. The Lord blinked. Scram. Then, he turned and disappeared. Inside the palace, Yi Xian shook his head. His own background? In fact, he didn't even know. Yi Xian gazed at the 6 of them, and then he pointed with his finger. 6 spatial rings descended before them, and every single one of them contained 100,000 divine fortune crystals. The 6 of them glanced at the spatial rings. Meanwhile, one of the black-robed figures hesitated for a moment before he said, "Young Master Yi, you're too kind." Yi Xian smiled. "The battle with the doubting is of utmost importance to the 5-dimensional universe. I hope that all of you can help me when the time comes. If I, Yi Xian, am able to survive, then I, Yi Xian, will definitely reward all of you handsomely." The black-robed figure in the lead put the spatial rings away. "We'll do our best." Yi Xian nodded. "Thank you. All of you hide yourselves for now. I'll ask all of you to lend a hand when the time comes." The 6 of them nodded, and then they vanished without a trace. Yi Xian walked out of the palace, and he looked up into the depths of the starry sky. No one knew what he was thinking. Meanwhile, Nian Nian suddenly appeared by Yi Xian's side. She took Yi Xian's hand and said softly, "I still can't remember anything." She'd been trying hard to recall the past, but she couldn't. Yi Xian withdrew his gaze, looked at Nian Nian, and smiled. "If you can't remember, then don't think about it. This time, I'll protect you." Nian Nian looked at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Yi Xian continued. "Just like how you protected me last time." Nian Nian looked up at Yi Xian. "What if you can't win?" Yi Xian smiled. "Then I'll die with Nian Nian. This time, if we live, then we'll live together. If we die, then we'll die together." Ancient God Abyss. An old man stood silently at the top of a pyramid. He looked up into the depths of the starry sky, and his eyes were filled with confusion. This person was Su Zhe. Ever since he'd met the woman in the plain dress, he'd been deeply affected. He'd already achieved the Tao. Originally, he'd thought that he was already standing at the peak of martial arts in this world. However, the appearance of the woman in the plain dress made him understand that he hadn't reached the peak at all. In fact, he was still a long way from the true peak. That woman was so strong that it made people feel hopeless. How could there be such a powerful person in this world? At this moment, an old man suddenly appeared beside Su Zhe. This person was Su Ku, who'd come into contact with Yi Xian in the depths of the dark world. Su Zhe withdrew his gaze. "How's the investigation going?" Su Ku said in a low voice. "It's clear. The young man I met in the dark world is the brother of the woman in the plain dress." In fact, he didn't know the woman in the plain dress. When she came to the ancient God Abyss, he wasn't there. When he returned to the ancient God Abyss and heard about the woman in the plain dress, he felt a lingering fear. Because he'd met Yi Xian. At that time, he'd almost attacked Yi Xian. Every time he thought about it, he felt a lingering fear. That mysterious woman had almost destroyed the ancient God Abyss. After the lingering fear, he rejoiced. This was because he'd formed a good relationship with Yi Xian. At this time, Su Zhe asked, "That young man is in the 5th dimension?" Su Ku nodded. "Yes. However, his current situation doesn't seem to be good." Su Zhe looked at Su Ku. "What do you mean?" Su Ku said in a low voice. "According to what I know, that Dao Ting wants to attack him." Su Zhe was stunned. "Dao Ting wants to attack him?" Su Ku nodded. "Young Master Yi has 5 Dao scriptures. Moreover, he seems to have a blood feud with Dao Ting. Now that Dao Ting Dao ancestor has come out, he's about to attack the 5th dimension." Su Zhe said softly, "This Dao Ting. His strength isn't that great, but his guts are really big." As he said this, he looked at Su Zhe. "Don't they know how strong that senior is?" Su Ku said in a low voice. "According to my investigation, they've investigated that senior. The 2 people that senior killed were from Dao Ting." Su Zhe frowned. "Then why do they still dare to cause trouble for young Master Yi?" Su Ku smiled bitterly. "That senior only used 1 sword to kill them. Therefore, they don't know her true strength. They might have misunderstood her strength. Suzhou was silent. That senior only used one sword to kill, but Dao Ting didn't know that she only used one sword to kill Dao Realm cultivators. Forget about Dao Realm cultivators, even if he was in front of her, he wouldn't be able to withstand one sword. Su Ke suddenly asked, should we help? Suzhou smiled. Of course we should help. That senior values this young Master Yi so much. If we can form a good relationship with this young Master Yi, it'll be the same as forming a good relationship with that senior. As he said this, he paused and then said, that senior might be training this young Master Yi. Therefore, we shouldn't rush to intervene. If young Master Yi is in danger, it won't be too late for us to intervene. Su Ke nodded. All right. I'll go to the 5th dimension now. Suzhou suddenly said, bring some people with you. Su Ke looked at Suzhou. How many people? Suzhou thought for a moment and said, just in case, bring 10 Dao Realm cultivators with you. If there are any changes, inform me immediately. P.S. Are there any tycoons among my readers? If there are, can you share how you got rich? I'm about to go to the sea. Chapter 1405. In the 5th dimension. On this day, somewhere in the 5th dimension, the starry sky suddenly split open. Then, a middle-aged man walked out. Dao Ancestor. The moment the Dao Ancestor appeared in the starry sky of the 5th dimension, all living beings in the 5th dimension felt a formless power. A Dao Realm expert. Behind the Dao Ancestor were Bai Dizzy and the others. Almost all the doubting experts were here. The Dao Ancestor suddenly said, set up the array. As soon as he said that, 7 godly lords suddenly appeared in 7 different directions. The next moment, the constellations moved and a huge starlight array covered the entire starry sky. 7 stars divine array. In the depths of the starry sky, the power of countless stars continuously gathered towards this array. This was the most powerful array of the doubting experts. It could borrow the power of thousands of stars. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of the Dao Ancestor. The Dao Ancestor looked at Yi Xian. Aren't you the young master of the whirling sect? Now, you can call the experts of the whirling sect to save you. Or, you can call the woman in the plain dress behind you. Yi Xian nodded. Okay. After saying that, he took out the Qingquan gourd. Immortal gourd, call some people over. There was no response. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Immortal gourd, don't play dead. Call some people over to help. At this moment, Immortal gourd suddenly said, Kid, I can call people over. I really can. However, if the people I call over know that you have so many Dao scriptures, Yi Xian threw Immortal gourd into the world prison pagoda. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian spread out his hands and the blood in his body started to tremble. Bloodline power. Seeing this scene, the Dao Ancestor's expression changed subtly. Yi Xian's bloodline had always been a mystery. Who was this guy's son? At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly raised his head and roared, Ancestor summoning. Ancestor summoning. Everyone, the Dao Ting and the other experts' expressions were extremely strange. This guy wanted to summon his ancestor? The Dao Ancestor's expression gradually turned solemn. He did not dare to underestimate Yi Xian's bloodline. As soon as Yi Xian's voice fell, a blood-red light suddenly shot up from his body. In an instant, the entire starry sky turned blood-red. It was extremely terrifying. The expressions of the experts from the Dao Palace turned solemn when they witnessed this scene. It looked a little scary. When Yi Xian shouted ancestral summoning, in a distant part of the starry sky, a man in green suddenly stopped. He turned his head and frowned. What is he doing? Beside the azure-robed man, a spear-wielding woman asked, What's wrong? The blue-clothed man had a strange expression. He's summoning his ancestor. The woman, the azure-clothed man shook his head. You even summoned your ancestor. He wants to ascend to the heavens. The woman said, maybe he ran into some trouble. The green-robed man pulled the woman's hand and walked away. Ignore him. The woman was about to speak when the azure-clothed man suddenly stopped. He turned his head and frowned. There was killing intent in his eyes. The woman asked, "What's wrong?" The azure-clothed man said, "Nianxue is in trouble." The woman was about to speak when the azure-clothed man said, "Wait for me. I'll be back soon." With that, he disappeared on the spot. The woman, at the side, the horned little girl suddenly said, "The daughter is her biological daughter. The son must have been picked up." In the five-dimensional universe, Yi Xian looked at the starry sky without any reaction. Yi Xian frowned. He tried again, but there was still no response. Yi Xian's expression darkened. Damn it. Summoning his ancestor didn't work. This was a little awkward. At this moment, the Dao ancestor suddenly said, "Yi Xian, I'll give you a chance to live. Are you leaving?" Yi Xian looked at the Dao ancestor. "Dao ancestor, why are you still saying such nonsense to me at a time like this? Are you retarded?" The Dao ancestor was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, "Jiao Lu." As soon as he finished speaking, a black shadow flashed out of Yi Xian's body. In the next moment, a huge dragon that was tens of thousands of meters long appeared in the starry sky. Jiao Lu. At this moment, Jiao Lu had already cultivated a Dao body. When he saw Jiao Lu, the Dao ancestor's expression changed. He looked at Yi Xian. "Jiao Lu, you," Yi Xian looked at Jiao Lu, "hold him back." In the sky, Jiao Lu dove directly towards the Dao ancestor. This charge caused the starry sky to tremble as if it was about to shatter. It was extremely shocking. When they saw this scene, the expressions of the doubting experts changed. This pressure was not weaker than the Dao ancestors at all. A trace of hostility flashed in the Dao ancestor's eyes. He lightly stomped his right foot and shot into the sky. In the sky, he punched out. This punch caused the entire starry sky to become illusory. Boom! The entire starry sky suddenly trembled violently. Then, Jiao Lu was blasted back. However, her strong body had withstood all the power of the Dao ancestor's punch. After forcing Jiao Lu back with a punch, the Dao ancestor turned to look at Bai Dizzy. "Kill. Leave no one alive." With that, he turned and rushed towards Jiao Lu again. Below, Bai Dizzy suddenly said, "Get out of the formation." As soon as he finished speaking, the seven-star god formation suddenly trembled violently. In the next moment, the energy of countless stars converged to form a huge blade, and the space around the huge blade instantly became illusory as soon as it appeared. This huge blade contained endless power of the stars. In the sky, Bai Dizzy suddenly roared, "Kill." The seven divine lords pointed at Yi Xian below as soon as they finished speaking. Chi. The huge blade of stars tore through the sky from the center of the formation. Wherever the blade passed, space was directly torn and shattered. Yi Xian had to receive this attack. If he did not, the huge blade of stars would enter the fifth dimension and destroy the fifth dimension's origin. However, Yi Xian did not dodge and allowed the huge blade of stars to slash into his body. Boom! Under everyone's gaze, the huge blade of stars was directly absorbed by Yi Xian. Yi Xian's aura skyrocketed. Seeing this scene, all the experts on the doubting stage were stunned. Bai Dizzy looked at Yi Xian in disbelief and said with a trembling voice, You can even absorb the power of the stars." With that, he roared like a madman, "Yi Xian! Ah. Is there anything that you can't absorb?" At that moment, Bai Dizzy was indeed very aggrieved. Yi Xian could absorb sword qi, turbid qi, and death qi. But now, Yi Xian could even absorb the power of the stars. Was this guy a black hole? He could absorb anything. Below, Yi Xian greedily took a deep breath, an intoxicated expression on his face. After absorbing the power of the stars, he felt that his cultivation level had improved a lot. It was really a great supplement. Yi Xian looked at Bai Dizzy, cupped his fists, and said with a smile, "Thank you." Hearing this, Bai Dizzy's face twitched. This was killing people. Yi Xian looked up at Jia Lu and the Dao ancestor. Jia Lu had already been suppressed by the Dao ancestor. Obviously, Jia Lu's strength was inferior to the Dao ancestors. However, with Jia Lu's powerful physical body, the Dao ancestor could not do anything to her for a while. Yi Xian withdrew his gaze and looked at White Robe. Little 7. As his voice fell, a sword light suddenly broke through the air from afar. Not far away, White Robe frowned slightly. He suddenly turned his head and stabbed out with his spear. Bang! White Robe was blasted over 100 m back. White Robe stared fixedly at Little 7 who had appeared in front of him. "You've become stronger again." He'd fought Little 7 the last time, and Little 7 wasn't so strong at that time. Little 7 didn't waste his breath at all. He charged at White Robe with his sword in hand. White Robe stomped his right foot on the ground, and then he vanished on the spot. In an instant, numerous sounds of slicing resounded. After White Robe was stopped, Yi Xian looked at Bai Dizzy and the others. Bai Dizzy was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly waved his right hand. In an instant, over 100,000 energy swords appeared around him. The expressions of Bai Dizzy and the others changed drastically when they witnessed this scene. Yi Xian suddenly pressed his fingers together and pointed forward. Slash! As soon as he finished speaking, over 100,000 energy swords tore through the air, and it was an extremely magnificent sight. Right at this moment, a white-haired old man suddenly appeared in front of Bai Dizzy and the others. The white-haired old man opened his palm, and a white square mirror appeared in his hand. In the next moment, a strand of dazzling white light suddenly erupted from the mirror. Bang! Yi Xian's foul energy was completely obstructed by the white light, and it was gradually dispersed. Yi Xian frowned when he witnessed this scene. What sort of mirror is that? It's actually able to disperse my foul energy. However, the white mirror in the white-haired old man's hand was slowly becoming illusory as well. Yi Xian didn't retract his foul energy because he noticed that the white-haired old man's mirror was on the verge of vanishing. Right at this moment, the white-haired old man suddenly put the mirror away, and then he transformed into an afterimage that shot explosively towards Yi Xian. Hiss! His body tore through space, and the space in an area of over 3 kilometers was even split apart into spiderwebs by the white-haired old man's body. It was an extremely shocking sight. Moreover, the foul energy hadn't even approached the white-haired old man when it was blasted away by a powerful force. Yi Xian's expression instantly became solemn when he witnessed this scene. A Dao Attainment Realm expert. The white-haired old man was actually an expert at the Dao Attainment Realm. Meanwhile, the white-haired old man had arrived in front of Yi Xian, and then he smashed his fist forward. This punch was very simple, yet it contained an extremely overbearing and violent force. This violent force seemed as if it could destroy the entire 5th dimension, and it was extremely terrifying. At the instant that the white-haired old man struck out with his fist, some of the foul energy in the space around Yi Xian was instantly transformed into nothingness. It wasn't just the foul energy, even the space around Yi Xian was shattered and obliterated at this moment. The might of this punch was sufficient to shatter the heavens and the earth. Yi Xian didn't dodge. He was unable to dodge this punch, so he could only take it head-on. Yi Xian took a step forward, drew his sword, and slashed. Dao sword. His sword slashed out, and sword light shot out like a waterfall. Rumble. An expanse of sword light shattered, and Yi Xian instantly retreated explosively by over 1 kilometer. As soon as he stopped, the space behind him had been transformed into nothingness. Yi Xian gazed at the white-haired old man with a solemn expression. This old man was much stronger than the white-robed old man and Jianghu. The white-haired old man glanced at Yi Xian, then turned his head to look at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy understood and looked down at the 5th dimension. Kill! As soon as his voice fell, the doubting experts behind him rushed toward the 5th dimension. This time, they didn't just want to kill Yi Xian, but also the entire fifth dimension. As long as the fifth dimension was not destroyed, Mu Niannian wouldn't die. Therefore, they had to destroy the entire fifth dimension to avoid any future troubles. At this moment, sword cries suddenly resounded from below, and the next moment, hundreds of sword lights collided from below. Sword sect. More than 300 swordsmen directly rushed into the starry sky. Although the doubting experts had a higher realm than the swordsmen from the sword sect, these swordsmen didn't have the slightest bit of fear in their eyes. Fight. In the eyes of all the swordsmen, there was only fighting spirit. Senior Sister Lu, who was in the lead, pointed her sword at the doubting experts. Fight to the last man. Kill. As soon as her voice fell, she directly turned into a sword light and rushed out. Hundreds of swordsmen attacked at the same time. In an instant, sword chi swept across the entire starry sky with terrifying momentum. Bai Dizzy was expressionless. Courting death. These swordsmen's battle prowess wasn't bad, but the difference between their realms and the doubting experts was too big. One had to know that the weakest doubting experts were Dao validation experts. Moreover, the majority of doubting experts were Dao defense experts. What was important was that these people had all stayed in the celestial abyss before, so their combat experience was quite rich. If these swordsmen were all Dao validation experts, perhaps there would be a fight. Unfortunately, these swordsmen were mostly self-release experts. At this moment, 6 mysterious experts suddenly rushed toward Bai Dizzy and the others. They were the 6 people that the Lord had given to Yi Xian. Apart from them, there were also Li Zua and the other 2. All 3 of them were at the peak of Dao defense. 9 super Dao defense realm experts. Seeing these 9 people, Bai Dizzy's expression changed subtly. However, these 9 people wouldn't be able to change the outcome of the battle. At this moment, Yi Xian, who was not far away, suddenly opened his palm. The next moment, 12 black shadows flew out from his palm. Then, 12 enormous Naga dragon souls appeared in the starry sky. As soon as the 12 Naga dragon souls appeared, Bai Dizzy's expression changed. It wasn't just Bai Dizzy, the white-haired old man who stood before Yi Xian frowned as well. These 12 Naga dragon souls were over 10 kilometers tall, and they emanated extremely powerful dragon energy. Even though they were only dragon souls, their auras were extremely powerful, and they were merely inferior to the 2 Dao attainment realm experts and Jia Lu. The white-haired old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. What's your relationship with the Naga dragons? Yi Xian looked at the white-haired old man and smiled. Take a guess. The white-haired old man didn't speak. Yi Xian is becoming more and more mysterious. Suddenly, the 12 Naga dragon souls swooped down towards Doubting and the other experts. The 12 Naga dragon souls swooped down in unison as if they intended to crush this expanse of the starry sky. At this moment, the entire starry sky trembled as if it was on the verge of collapse. It was an extremely shocking sight. Yi Xian was slightly shocked as well because he hadn't expected the Naga dragon souls to be so strong. The 12 Naga dragon souls were sufficient to resist a few dozen Dao attainment realm experts. At the same time, Anlanxiu and the others had arrived. Anlanxiu, Arrow, Agajio, Situ, Zhang Wenxiu, Lian Wanli, and the others had attained the Dao validation realm. Even though they were only at the Dao validation realm, they didn't feel any pressure when resisting Dao attainment realm experts. Bai Dizzy's face instantly fell when he witnessed this scene. The overall strength of the fifth dimension was still inferior to Doubting, but it wasn't as weak as Doubting thought either. The current fifth dimension was completely capable of fighting Doubting. As if he'd thought of something, Bai Dizzy suddenly turned to look at the white-haired old man in the distance. Elder Mi, kill Yi Xian first. The white-haired old man looked at Yi Xian, and then he slowly clenched his right hand. At this moment, the space around him instantly became illusory. In the distance, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes, and a powerful strand of killing intent gradually spread out from within him. Meanwhile, the white-haired old man suddenly vanished on the spot. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes, and they were completely blood red. Yi Xian suddenly roared furiously, "Kill!" As soon as he finished speaking, he slashed down with his sword. This strike wasn't just a Dao sword, it also contained killing intent. An expanse of blood-red light suddenly erupted in front of him. In an instant, Yi Xian retreated explosively by over 1 kilometer, and he just stopped when the white-haired old man suddenly appeared in front of him. After that, the white-haired old man smashed his fist towards Yi Xian's stomach. This punch could destroy the heavens and the earth. However, at this moment, Yi Xian actually didn't dodge at all and allowed the punch to strike his chest. Bang! Yi Xian's figure was blasted flying, but at the instant he flew, a sword stabbed into the white-haired old man's left shoulder. Soul-suppressing sword. Bang! A powerful soul force directly enveloped the white-haired old man, causing his expression to change drastically. His reaction was extremely fast, and his right hand abruptly pulled out the soul-suppressing sword. At the same time, his entire figure retreated hundreds of meters. After stopping, the white-haired old man's body turned illusory, and his entire person was extremely abnormal. However, his soul gradually returned to normal. After all, he was a Dao attainment realm expert, so it was impossible for his soul to be shattered by a single slash from the soul-suppressing sword. After the white-haired old man's soul calmed down, he lifted his head to look at Yi Xian in the distance. There was a trace of seriousness in his eyes. In that instant just now, he'd almost fallen for Yi Xian's Dao. If he hadn't reacted fast enough, his soul would have been severely injured. Other than that, he'd also noticed something else, and that was Yi Xian's physical body. Yi Xian had forcefully taken a punch from him, but Yi Xian was still standing normally. The white-haired old man unwaveringly stared at Yi Xian. "Your physical body is unexpectedly strong to this extent." In the distance, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. In his heart, he felt that it was a pity. That sword just now had almost seriously injured the old man's soul. He'd still underestimated a Dao realm expert. Yi Xian opened his eyes and looked around. At this moment, the experts of the fifth dimension and the Daoting experts were already in full swing. Because of the 12 Naga dragon souls, the fifth dimension side was not too disadvantaged. However, the situation was not good for the fifth dimension, because Jia Lu couldn't beat the Dao ancestor. At this moment, Jia Lu was completely suppressed. If it weren't for her physical body being too strong, she would have already been killed. At this moment, the Dao ancestor suddenly punched Jia Lu. He didn't follow up with another attack. Instead, he looked down at Yi Xian and said fiercely, "Yi Xian, today, you and that Mu Nianyan must die. No one can protect the two of you." As his voice faded, he opened his palm and roared, "Great Dao restoration." As his voice faded, the starlight in the entire starry sky was annihilated. On the other side, the white-haired old man slowly clenched his right hand, and a powerful fist force locked onto Yi Xian. It should be said that the entire starry sky was enveloped by this fist force. Fist Dao. Obviously, the two of them wanted to join forces to kill Yi Xian first. As long as they killed Yi Xian, the entire fifth dimension would instantly collapse. How terrifying would it be if two Dao realm experts joined forces? At this moment, in the starry sky, the Dao ancestor suddenly slapped down with his palm. A palm print swept down from the starry sky. Boom! The entire starry sky trembled as if there was a huge earthquake. In front of Yi Xian, the white-haired old man suddenly took a step forward and punched out. Boom! A fist print that could destroy heaven and earth headed straight for Yi Xian. Wherever the fist print passed, the starry sky was destroyed. Chapter 1406. In the starry sky, Yi Xian was like a floating page in the ocean in front of these two forces. He seemed so frail. At this moment, Yi Xian's expression was surprisingly calm. Could he beat them? He definitely couldn't. Yi Xian could at most fight one Dao attainment realm expert. He definitely couldn't fight two Dao attainment realm experts working together. After all, he was only at the Dao validation realm. Even with a Dao body, he couldn't beat 2 Dao attainment realm experts. But he couldn't retreat. Yi Xian wasn't a pedantic person. In the past, he would have chosen to flee if he couldn't beat them. But at this moment, he had no way out. Because the 5-dimensional universe was behind him. His family and friends were behind him. Nian Nian was behind him. If he retreated, everyone would die. Since he couldn't retreat, he could only fight. He had to fight even if he couldn't beat them. At this point, the blood in Yi Xian's body suddenly trembled. Gradually, powerful bloodline power surged out of his body. Killing intent and bloodline power. The executing heaven sword in Yi Xian's hand became a sword spirit. Yi Xian suddenly took a step forward and slashed with his sword. Dao sword. A Dao sword that was enhanced by killing intent and bloodline power. The power of this sword shook the starry sky. Bang! As soon as Yi Xian slashed with his sword, a blood-colored sword light suddenly exploded in front of him. In an instant, Yi Xian retreated thousands of meters. Although he was strong, he couldn't resist the power of 2 Dao attainment realm experts. In the sky, the Dao ancestor was about to attack again when Jia Lu slammed into him. A trace of viciousness flashed in the Dao ancestor's eyes as he punched. Bang! Jia Lu was sent flying by the punch, and many parts of her body had already begun to slowly crack. After sending Jia Lu flying, the Dao ancestor looked down at Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian slowly stood up. Although he hadn't fought with his life on the line, his powerful body had held on. Although he was injured, it wasn't fatal. The Dao ancestor looked down at Yi Xian, his eyes cold. Overconfident ant. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly slapped his palm forward, and the space in front of Yi Xian directly shattered layer by layer. Yi Xian suddenly leaped up and slashed forward with his sword in both hands. Boom! With a slash, the space in front of Yi Xian was slashed into nothingness. At this time, the Dao ancestor suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. He pointed a finger at Yi Xian. This finger directly touched the tip of Yi Xian's sword. Boom! Yi Xian flew out instantly, but the Dao ancestor's entire arm also cracked at this moment. The Dao ancestor frowned slightly when he saw that. He looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand in the distance with a grim look in his eyes. This sword was actually able to injure him. As soon as Yi Xian stopped, the white-haired old man suddenly appeared behind him, and the white-haired old man directly punched at Yi Xian's head. If this punch hit, even if Yi Xian had a Dao body, he would probably be seriously injured. Both the white-haired old man and the Dao ancestor didn't hold back at all. Their goal was to kill Yi Xian. Yi Xian's reaction was extremely fast. At the instant the old man punched, he suddenly turned around and blocked with his sword. Boom! Yi Xian's entire body directly retreated thousands of meters away. And before he could stop, the Dao ancestor appeared in front of him again. Yi Xian's pupils suddenly constricted, and he slashed with his sword. Boom! A wave of blood-red sword lights suddenly exploded, and Yi Xian was sent flying again. As soon as he was sent flying, the ancestral lord suddenly approached him and threw a punch at Yi Xian's face. Although it was just a simple punch, this punch was even more powerful than some divine skills. At the level of experts like the Dao ancestor, every punch and finger contained their own Dao, which was not something that some divine skills and martial skills could compare to. Seeing this punch coming, Yi Xian didn't dodge, and let the Dao ancestor's punch hit his body. However, at this moment, his sword also slashed on the Dao ancestor's head. Boom! The sword light shattered, and Yi Xian flew out again. This time, he flew thousands of meters away. And the Dao ancestor forcibly withstood Yi Xian's sword. This was because a golden light had appeared around him, and it was this golden light that had withstood Yi Xian's sword just now. The Dao ancestor looked coldly at Yi Xian in the distance. Do you think you're the only one who has a life-saving method? You. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly leaped up, and then he suddenly slashed his sword down towards the Tao ancestor. The moment he struck with his sword, the white-haired old man not far away suddenly disappeared. Immediately after, a fist mark appeared behind Yi Xian. However, at this moment, a woman appeared behind Yi Xian. Enlanxiu. Enlanxiu suddenly stabbed her spear forward. Bang! Enlanxiu was blasted 3 kilometers back, and as soon as she stopped moving, a wisp of blood seeped out from the corner of her mouth. She hadn't cultivated a Tao body, so she was utterly unable to endure the strength of an expert at the Tao realm. On the other hand, Yi Xian's sword slashed towards the Tao ancestor in the distance, but it was stopped by the Tao ancestor as well. Even though his Tao sword was formidable, it was too difficult to kill a Tao ancestor. Meanwhile, Enlanxiu retreated to Yi Xian's side, and she spoke in a low voice. "Are you alright?" Even though Yi Xian's bloodline had been activated, he hadn't gone completely berserk. Even though his strength would increase explosively after going completely berserk, he wouldn't recognize anyone in that state. So, he didn't dare allow himself to go completely berserk. Yi Xian wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth. "I can still fight." Enlanxiu gazed at the white-haired old man. "I'll stop him for you." As soon as she finished speaking, she was about to attack. However, Yi Xian suddenly grabbed her hand. Enlanxiu gazed at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian shook his head. No. Enlanxiu didn't possess a Tao body, so she was utterly unable to endure the white-haired old man's strength. Just that strike from before had already heavily injured Enlanxiu. Enlanxiu was just about to speak when the Tao ancestor suddenly vanished on the spot. After that, a formidable force swept towards Yi Xian and Enlanxiu. On the other side, the white-haired old man had suddenly vanished on the spot as well. Hiss! The space behind Yi Xian and Enlanxiu suddenly collapsed layer by layer. Enlanxiu suddenly turned around. She didn't retreat but advanced instead, and she charged forward and stabbed her spear forward. The spear was like a dragon that pierced through the heavens and the earth. Meanwhile, a fist smashed directly onto Enlanxiu's spear. Bang! The spear shook violently while Enlanxiu instantly retreated explosively. During the process of her retreat, her entire body suddenly became ethereal. In the next moment, she suddenly smashed her fist forward. As soon as her fist shot forward, countless afterimages suddenly appeared here, and all of these afterimages punched out at the same time. The white-haired old man who intended to follow up with another attack had suddenly stopped, and then he smashed his fist forward. Bang! The afterimages that covered the sky instantly vanished, and at this moment, a spear tore through the sky towards them. The white-haired old man frowned slightly as he punched once more, and the might of this punch was peerlessly domineering. Bang! The spear shattered into pieces, and Enlanxiu instantly retreated 3 kilometers away. The white-haired old man was just about to attack again when Jianghu suddenly appeared in front of Enlanxiu. She glanced at Enlanxiu and said, "Let's attack together." As soon as she finished speaking, she charged directly towards the white-haired old man. Enlanxiu stomped her right foot and transformed into a streak of white light that shot towards Bai. The white-haired old man charged forward. Meanwhile, Yi Xian had already started fighting with that Tao ancestor. Yi Xian was still suppressed, but without the help of the white-haired old man, the Tao ancestor could only suppress Yi Xian. Because Yi Xian's body was too strong. Moreover, Yi Xian had 4 domains. With the help of the 4 domains and the power of his bloodline, although he was suppressed, he could contend with the Tao ancestor. On the other side, the Lord had been paying attention to the battlefield in the starry sky. Beside the Lord were Yan Yaoyao, Luoho, and the others. Luoho looked at Yi Xian in the distance and said softly, "This person is truly a peerless genius. To actually resist a Tao ancestor for so long at the Tao corroboration realm." Qi Yaoyao spoke abruptly, "His body is strong. If his body wasn't strong enough, he would have perished a long time ago." Luoho was quite curious, "What's his body? Why is it so strong?" As he spoke, he gazed at Yan Yaoyao. Yan Yaoyao shook her head. Don't look at me, I don't know either. She gazed at the Lord as she spoke. The Lord is knowledgeable. Do you know what his body is? The Lord shook his head. I've never seen such a strong body. It can even resist the strength of a Tao attainment realm expert. Meanwhile, Luo Ho spoke abruptly. Those two women can't resist the doubting Lord Mi. Yan Yaoyao gazed at Enlancio and Jialo. Even though they were strong, they were still being suppressed by Lord Mi. Yi Xian wasn't suppressing them either. If this continued, then Yi Xian's side would lose sooner or later. Meanwhile, Ku spoke abruptly. Have all of you noticed? Yi Xian's aura is growing stronger and stronger. Everyone gazed at Yi Xian. Even though Yi Xian was being suppressed, his aura was growing stronger and stronger. The Lord suddenly smiled. Interesting. This fellow might be breaking through during the battle. Yan Yaoyao spoke softly. Will the Tao ancestor give him that chance? The Lord shook his head. Once this fellow reaches the Tao attainment realm, it'll be impossible for the Tao ancestor to kill him alone. Even if he joins forces with Lord Mi, it'll be difficult to kill Yi Xian. Qi Yaoyao spoke. So they're going to use their trump card? The Lord nodded. They should be. Ku spoke abruptly. Lord, if we help Yi Xian now, wouldn't it be easy to destroy the doubting realm? The Lord smiled without a word. Yan Yaoyao spoke softly. If it's so easy to destroy the doubting realm, then you're underestimating the doubting realm. Ku frowned. Why? Do they have a stronger trump card? Yan Yaoyao looked at the Lord. The Lord smiled. You'll be shocked. Ku spoke in a low voice. Then why aren't they using the doubting realm? Qi Yaoyao replied. If I'm not wrong, they're saving it to deal with the people behind Yi Xian realm. Ku glanced around and spoke softly. Will the people behind Yi Xian realm appear? The Lord smiled. Who knows? At this moment, Yi Xian, who was not far away, suddenly forced the Tao ancestor back with a sword strike. Everyone looked at Yi Xian in the distance. Yi Xian stood there with his sword in hand, exuding a powerful aura. He was about to break through. Yi Xian greedily took a deep breath, the blood in his body surging. Powerful auras gushed out of his body, causing the entire starry sky to boil. Opposite Yi Xian, the Tao ancestor was expressionless. Want to break through? You're dreaming. As soon as he spoke, something appeared on the battlefield. The expressions of everyone in the fifth dimension changed drastically. Qi Yaoyao and the others also changed drastically. P.S. Everyone, please support the original version. One chapter costs 9 cents. I'll update 3 chapters a day, so it's only 10 cents. Thank you for your support. Thank you. Those who subscribe to the original version are the ones who feed us. Thank you for your support. Chapter 1407. The reason Qi Yaoyao and the others were shocked was because 2 figures had appeared behind Yi Xian. These 2 figures were actually at the Tao completion realm. Another 2 at the Tao completion realm. Doubting didn't only have 2 at the Tao completion realm, but 4. When they saw this scene, many experts of the 5th dimension already felt despair. If there were only 2 at the Tao completion realm, then the 5th dimension could still fight them. But now, there were 4. How could they fight? They couldn't fight at all. The 2 Tao completion realm experts charged at Yi Xian as soon as they appeared. Obviously, they didn't want to give Yi Xian any chance. This was normal, because no one knew what would happen if Yi Xian reached the Tao resistance realm. The best way was to kill him before he broke through. Nearby, when they saw the 2 Tao attainment realm experts and the Tao ancestor charge towards Yi Xian, the expressions of Enlancio and the other women instantly changed, and they charged directly towards Yi Xian. However, it was utterly too late. Because the speed of the Tao ancestor and the 2 Tao attainment experts was simply too fast. The Lord and the others were also looking at Yi Xian. If the person behind Yi Xian didn't appear, then Yi Xian would basically be gone. Right at this moment, the three Dao ancestors who were charging at Yi Xian seemed to have noticed something. Their expressions changed drastically, and they retreated like madmen. An ear-piercing sword howl suddenly resounded. The Lord's eyes narrowed. Not far away, over a dozen strands of sword qi were circling around Yi Xian. This wasn't Yi Xian's sword qi. It was the sword qi that Yi Xian had brought out of the dark realm. Who was the owner of this sword qi? It was Situ Tingyun. Besides the green-clothed man, she was the strongest in the sword Dao and the sword sect. Even though these strands of sword qi were ownerless, they were still very powerful. In the distance, the three Dao ancestors had extremely solemn expressions. It was especially so for the Dao ancestor. His expression was unprecedentedly solemn. He had seen such a powerful sword qi once before, from Moon Yinyan. And now, he saw it again. And this sword qi was clearly not Moon Yinyan's sword qi. In other words, behind Yi Xian, there was a powerful swordsman who was no weaker than Moon Yinyan. On the other side, Qing Yaoyao suddenly said, "The sword qi in the dark world vortex." Rahu nodded. "I didn't expect him to be able to use this sword qi. This guy is too mysterious." The Lord looked at the sword qi and fell into deep thought. Not far away, Yi Xian closed his eyes. At this moment, he felt that he had reached a critical point. The breakthrough was imminent. At that moment, the nearby Dao ancestor suddenly said, "This sword qi has no owner. Ownerless sword qi." In other words, if the sword qi was destroyed, there would be nothing left. The Dao ancestor was about to make a move when Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. "How do you know it has no owner?" The Dao ancestor stared at Yi Xian. "If it has a owner, why don't you let the sword qi's owner come out?" Yi Xian smiled. "Dao ancestor, aren't you thinking too highly of yourself? Are you worthy of letting the sword qi's owner come out?" The Dao ancestor was expressionless. "Yi Xian, at this point, is there any use in using words? If you have someone, then call them out." Yi Xian laughed. "Dao ancestor, are you afraid?" The Dao ancestor looked at Yi Xian and was about to speak. At that moment, a Dao attainment expert suddenly said, "He's stalling for time." Stalling for time. The Dao ancestor narrowed his eyes. At this moment, Yi Xian's aura was unprecedentedly powerful. He was about to break through. The Dao ancestor suddenly said, "Destroy the sword qi first." With that, he charged at Yi Xian. The other two Dao fulfillment experts also rushed over. Meanwhile, the sword qi around Yi Xian slashed out. Hiss. 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 Over a dozen sword qi tore through the starry sky. It was extremely terrifying. It had to be said that the Dao ancestor and the other two Dao attainment experts were suppressed by the sword qi. Even the Dao ancestor and the other two Dao attainment experts didn't dare to go head-on against the sword qi. On the other side, the Lord said softly, "A single sword qi that hasn't been destroyed for tens of thousands of years, and it's so powerful. It's ridiculously powerful." Luo Ho and the others didn't look too good. They were supposed to be the strongest experts in this world. But after seeing the sword qi, they suddenly realized that they were really weak. Not only was the sword qi indestructible for tens of thousands of years, but it was also so powerful. Peak. What they thought was the pinnacle was just a joke to some people. It was like that to Moon Yinyan, and it was the same to the sword qi's owner. In the distance, after the Dao ancestor and the other two Dao attainment experts were stalled by the sword qi, Yi Xian began to break through to the Dao attainment realm. He had to reach the Dao attainment realm. Once he did, his overall strength would undergo a qualitative transformation. At this moment, the Dao ancestor and the other two Dao attainment experts were burning with anxiety. If Yi Xian reached the Dao attainment realm, Yi Xian wouldn't be able to fight against the three of them alone. However, once he reached the Dao attainment realm, he would become an unknown variable. Who knew what would happen after he reached the Dao attainment realm? Not far away, the Dao ancestor and the other two Dao attainment experts began to use their full strength. Although the sword chi suppressed the three Dao ancestors, it was becoming more and more illusory. After all, it was ownerless sword chi that could be consumed and destroyed. On the other side, the battle between the experts of the fifth dimension and the experts of the Dao court was in full swing. The experts of the fifth dimension were at a slight disadvantage, but because of the 12 Naga dragon souls, the experts of the fifth dimension were only at a slight disadvantage. This was because the 12 Naga dragon souls were really too powerful. In order to deal with the 12 Naga dragon souls, the Dao Ting had mobilized a total of 26 divine sovereigns. Moreover, these 26 divine sovereigns were being suppressed by the 12 Naga dragon souls. In addition, Li Zhua and the other two Dao ancestors were also extremely powerful. The three of them were forcefully holding back 11 divine sovereigns. It could be said that it would be difficult to determine the victor between the two sides in a short period of time. However, the situation was becoming more and more disadvantageous for Yi Xian's side. This was because two of Yi Xian's dozen sword chis had already disappeared. Although the sword chis were powerful, they were ownerless. If they were consumed too much, they would completely disappear. Now, the Dao ancestors and the other two Dao ancestors were madly consuming these sword chis. On the other side, Luoho said softly, "He's about to break through." Just as he finished speaking, boom. In the distance, a powerful aura suddenly erupted from Yi Xian's body. Wherever this aura passed, the surrounding starry sky trembled. Dao attainment realm. Seeing that Yi Xian was breaking through, Luoho shook his head. This guy breaks through like eating. It's really infuriating to compare oneself with others. The Lord smiled, he risked his life. Qi Yaoyao suddenly said, "Does the Dao Ting still have a trump card?" The Lord looked at Qi Yaoyao and smiled, "You want to help?" Qi Yaoyao said softly, "Why not?" The Lord smiled, "If we help Yi Xian, even if the Dao Ting has a trump card, we can still destroy the Dao Ting. Of course, we will just have to pay a price." Qi Yaoyao looked at the Lord, "Does the Lord not choose to help because you have other concerns?" The Lord looked at the faraway Yi Xian and said softly, "He is a whirlpool. If we get too involved, it will be difficult for us to escape in the future." Qi Yaoyao was silent. She knew that the Lord was talking about the reason for Yi Xian's misfortune. The Lord was worried about this. At this moment, the Lord suddenly smiled, "Let's wait and see." In the distance, after Yi Xian broke through, he waved his right hand and the 10 sword energies suddenly flew back in front of him. Seeing this, the Dao ancestor and the others' expressions became even uglier. It wasn't because of Yi Xian's breakthrough, but because Yi Xian could control the 10 sword energies. After all, these 10 sword energies weren't Yi Xian's own sword energies. Yi Xian greedily took a deep breath. Dao Defense Realm. After reaching the Dao Defense Realm, he felt that everything was different. His divine soul, divine sense, strength, and his own body, everything had undergone earth-shattering changes. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly looked at the Dao ancestor. The next moment, he appeared in front of the Dao ancestor and slashed down with his sword. Dao sword. And 4 more domains. The Dao ancestor narrowed his eyes, took a step forward, and pointed out with a finger. Head on. At this moment, Yi Xian's sword fell. Boom. Under the gazes of everyone. The Dao ancestor was instantly pushed over 1 kilometer back, and his right index finger had been severed by Yi Xian's attack. Besides that, his right arm had split open and blood sprayed from it. The expressions of everyone here became solemn when they witnessed this scene. The Lord frowned slightly as well. Isn't Yi Xian's strength a little too exaggerated after he attained the Dao defense realm? He'd injured a Dao ancestor with a single strike of his sword. Meanwhile, Yan Yaoyao suddenly said, "It's his body." The Lord gazed at Yi Xian and spoke softly, "What formidable physical strength. What cultivation technique does he cultivate? His body is actually so strong." Yi Xian's combat strength had risen by so much mainly because of his physical body. Dao Defense. Now, Yi Xian hadn't just attained the Dao Defense realm in terms of physical body, his cultivation had as well. It wasn't as simple as 1 plus 1. The Dao ancestor stared fixedly at Yi Xian from afar, and he was extremely shocked. How could Yi Xian's combat strength be so great after attaining the Dao Defense realm? The Dao ancestor restrained his thoughts and glanced at the two others. Let's attack together. As soon as he finished speaking, he charged forward. The other two experts at the Dao Formation realm attacked as well. 3 experts at the Dao Formation realm attacked together. Yi Xian took a step forward and slashed with his sword. Bang! His attack blasted the Dao ancestor back, but it only took a moment for 2 fists to smash against Yi Xian's chest and head. Bang! Yi Xian's figure was instantly blasted flying, and he flew for over 3 kilometers. After he stopped moving, Yi Xian felt dizzy. Meanwhile, the 2 Dao Formation realm experts appeared in front of him again. Yi Xian's expression changed slightly, and he swung his sword horizontally. Bang! An expanse of sword light exploded apart, and then Yi Xian was blasted flying again. Meanwhile, the Dao ancestor suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian, and he suddenly swung his fist at Yi Xian. Bang! The starry sky trembled as his fist smashed forward. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and then Situ Tingyun's 10 strands of sword energy suddenly slashed forward. The Dao ancestor's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene, and he immediately retreated explosively. The other 2 Dao Formation realm experts hurriedly retreated as well. Situ Tingyun's sword energy was capable of killing them. Yi Xian wiped off the blood on the corners of his mouth with a solemn expression on his face. Even though he'd attained the Dao Defense realm, he was still unable to fight 3 enemies by himself. Should I activate the energy of my bloodline? Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. The energy of his bloodline had gone completely berserk, and it was his final trump card. The Dao ancestor stared fixedly at Yi Xian from afar, and he was even more shocked by Yi Xian's physical body. Yi Xian had just suffered the full-forced attacks of 2 Dao Formation realm experts, yet he was still alive and well. What sort of physical body is this? Meanwhile, one of the Dao Formation realm experts by the Dao ancestor's side spoke abruptly. We can't delay any longer. If we continue to delay, then both our forces and the 5th dimension will suffer heavy losses. Moreover, I'm afraid an unexpected event might occur. The Dao ancestor turned around to look. At this moment, the experts of the 5th dimension were locked in battle with the experts of the Dao Ting realm. If this continued, then both sides would suffer heavy losses. After all, the Dao Ting realm had another enemy, and it was the Dao Tomb. As for the 3 of them, although they could defeat Yi Xian had the sword qi and Yi Xian's powerful physical body, so they wouldn't be able to kill Yi Xian in a short period of time. Thinking to this point, the Dao ancestor looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, I originally prepared a big gift for the woman behind you, but since she won't appear, then I'll give it to you. As he spoke, he opened his palm, and the next moment, a golden light soared into the sky from the 34th layer of the Dao Ting realm. In the blink of an eye, this golden light appeared in the starry sky of the 5th dimension. In an instant, the entire starry sky trembled. Inside that golden light was a god seal. Inside that god seal, an illusory figure gradually condensed. As this illusory figure condensed, a formless pressure enveloped the entire 5th dimension. Under this pressure, everyone felt like they were suffocating. Even Yi Xian felt a tightness in his chest at this moment, as if there were several mountains pressing down on him. On the other side, the Lord's expression also became incomparably solemn. The head of the 3,000 Great Daos, you're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.